Return of the Mount Hua Sect, Chapter 201. Let's just call it my whim. If you look at the central plains as if it were a chessboard, the place where you want to place your stone to make a path to escape from all this encompassing siege isn't on the inside, but on the outside. Even if you make an alliance on the inside, it won't change anything. Do you think Mount Hua is worth that much? Mount Hua isn't even in the 9th grade sects anymore. It's just because we aren't part of the 9th grade sects that we're worth it. Would we be crazy enough to join hands with the Tang family if we were? We'd rather hang with the other sects. Tangganak looked at Chung Myung with a bewildered face. Even if that was true, people don't usually say such things, especially in front of the Lord of the Tang family. Let's talk without pretense, because I don't have the hobby of talking in circles for nothing. The Tang Lord is trying to hold back the other sects from besieging the Tang family by taking the hands of Mount Hua. That is your true purpose. If the rumors spread that the Tang family formed an alliance with Mount Hua, of course they will start to become conscious of our sect. That will ease the scrutiny on your family. Tangganak let out a low sigh. Still, Tangganak eased his form and sat tall as he looked at Chung Myung with a slightly serious face. I think I've misjudged you. How did you judge me? That you're a brat with strong martial arts. I'll have to change it to a brat who also has strong martial arts. Tangbo, you bastard! Just you wait. Why didn't you take care of your descendants, you stupid bastard? Not knowing what was going on in Chung Myung's head, Tangganak simply looked at him and said nothing. What is this? Tangganak hadn't had much experience with people being so direct with him. In particular, he had never felt so thoroughly exposed, and that too to a child who hadn't lived half his life. With such helplessness in heart. In Tangganak's head, the evaluation of Mount Hua and Chung Myung were spot on, and the change in these plans were also right. I admit it, I wanted that. Tangganak simply acknowledged Chung Myung's words. It wasn't a good idea to lie around someone who so clearly saw through him. Negotiations would only become more difficult if the two sides couldn't trust each other. It was better to admit it from the start. So does Mount Hua have other thoughts? No, it isn't different, but... In our alliance, the Tang family mostly gains a number of liberties, while Mount Hua has too many constraints, so it's unfair. I want a justifiable compensation, not something that is to be given out in a condescending manner. A just compensation. Chung Myung looked at Tangganak with calm eyes. That will be the right deal. True. Then Before Tangganak could finish his words, Chung Myung cut Tangganak's words. But before that, Chung Myung's smile had vanished. Let us make one thing certain. Here, the Tang family is not helping out Mount Hua, but Mount Hua is helping out the Tang family. So get rid of the thought of looking down on us. I am representing Mount Hua now. At Chung Myung's words, Tangganak's face went stiff. In that brief moment, Tangganak's expression changed several times, and the words which came out after those changes didn't carry much power. It seems I've made a mistake. Tangganak got up from his seat and bowed to Chung Myung. Tangganak of the Sichuan Tang family apologizes to Chung Myung, the disciple of Mount Hua. I accept that apology. Chung Myung smiled. The two of them then sat down in their seats without another word. Although the outer appearance hadn't changed from the first time, their feelings had changed. What will the Tang family have to do for Mount Hua to hold hands with us? There are 3 conditions. 3. The first is weapons. Tangganak's face went stiff. The poison and needle techniques of the Tang family will not go outside this family under any circumstance. If you want the Tang family's techniques, assume that this negotiation will not go through. It isn't that. What good will your needles and poison do for Mount Hua? Then, Chung Myung, without another word, pulled out his sword from the waist. It was very rude to draw a sword at the lord of the Tang family without permission, but Tang Genak assumed that there was an intention for it and watched silently. See this? Chung Myung's Plum Blossom Sword was broken from the middle. It isn't of good quality. Well, I might have been too rough with it, but it wasn't a very good sword in the first place. This was bound to happen. There was no money in Mount Hua. Now we have money, but we have a hard time finding people who make good swords in bulk. Because the other sects have already taken them. Right, but here we have some of the best makers, and making swords can be done like steaming dumplings. Isn't there a saying that skilled calligraphers don't blame the brush? Nonsense! If you go visit a skilled calligrapher, I'm sure you'll see they have over hundreds of brushes. Right. Tang Genak nodded his head. It was true that the Tang family had craftsmen who were the best in the world, and that they spared no investment in making good weapons. So he didn't hate the words of Chung Myung, who understood the importance of weapons. The fact that I can show off my skill, even if the sword is bad, means that I can show off my skills in full power if I get my hands on a very good sword. I have heard that the smelting technique of the Tang family is the best, and I would be grateful if our Plum Blossom swords could be made by your family. I will accept this. It isn't too difficult. Considering the power of the Tang family, making swords from Mount Hua was nothing huge. So that meant that the next two conditions would be bigger ones. The second, give us one skill. Tang Genak frowned. You seem to know well, and yet keep asking unreasonable things. The techniques and legacy of the Tang family cannot be passed on unless they are of blood. You keep saying the same thing. I wasn't speaking about the legacy. Then, not the legacy of the Tang family. Was there anything more in the family? Chung Myung, who received the curious gaze of Tang Genak, took off his shirt, and he began to untie the bandage which had been wrapped around his stomach. Now, there was only a bit of redness left in the place where the wound had been. In just 3 days, the stab wound had been healed completely. It has recovered well. That's because the medical skill was good. You don't mean? Yes, what I want is the medical skills of the Tang family. Tang Genak's expression darkened. The medical skills of the Tang family. Of course, it couldn't be called the Tang family's legacy, because the real legacy of the Tang family were their daggers, poison, and needles. But this wasn't something that could be easily passed on, because there was no origin. Why are you interested in that? No one has ever wanted to learn it. Because I need it. Chung Myung shrugged. As Tang Genak said, the medicine wasn't of much value to the family. It was because it was impossible to open a practitioner center for the Tang family with just these skills. The reason? It was simple. Because diseases couldn't be cured, and the skills of the Tang family mainly focused on external and internal injuries. It was clear if one thought about it. Unless one was a warrior, who else would get external injuries, poisoned, or injured? Even still, if a medical center was open just for that, people would assume that the person who opened it was hoping for people to get hurt. But Mount Hua needs it. In his dream, Tangbo had informed him just how important medicine was. He didn't even listen to Tangbo then. He thought that if he could get stronger than anyone, he wouldn't have to consider getting injuries. The stronger one was, the less chances they had of getting hurt. But what was the reality that Chung Myung had faced? Everyone had died. If Chung Myung had known or learned the medical skills of the Tang family, he might have been able to save a few people. But at that time, all Chung Myung knew was to become stronger. Could internal organs that had been slashed with internal ki be reattached again? It sounded like nonsense, but if Chung Myung had known about it, then he could have saved Tangbo. He couldn't forget the face of Tangbo, who was holding his hand around the knife in his heart even now. He didn't want the disciples of Mount Hua to go through that, because the helplessness and sadness were too much for just one person to bear. Please pass the medical skills of the Tang family to Mount Hua, and that will lead to people visiting the Tang family, which would naturally help to grow our friendship. It isn't easy. I will have to convince the family. Which is why I picked it as a condition. Tanganak frowned. This wasn't easy. It definitely was not. I'll try to get it done. If that was the price for bringing over Mount Hua to their side, he would give it away. No, he had to get Mount Hua on his side. Up to this, I can somehow get it done. But after hearing this, I am afraid to know the third and final one. It is probably the biggest one, right? Yes, it is the biggest. What is that? Chung Myung took a deep breath and looked straight at Tanganak and said it. This wasn't a request from Mount Hua, but a request from Chung Myung. Think of Mount Hua as a friend. Isn't that natural? We have an alliance. Not as an alliance, but as a friend. Chung Myung spoke resolutely. It isn't an alliance that you can abandon when you want, depending on the situation and circumstances. But rather, think of us as a friend you can reach out to when you are in trouble. That is what I want. This meant nothing. This wasn't something which could be promised, and it wasn't something which would be followed just because it was promised. And Chung Myung knew it well. Still, I can't help but talk about it. I don't understand. Tanganak said frankly. Everything you asked so far had a reason. But I don't see a reason for this one. Am I missing something in the picture? You aren't. Then why are you saying this? I don't know. Chung Myung closed his eyes. Daoist Hyung! Don't make that face, damn bastard! Chung Myung opened his eyes as he shrugged. Let's just call it my whim. Whim. Tanganak opened his mouth with a stiff face. Do you know? What? There are countless people who want to be with the Tang family. Right, because the Sichuan Tang family is that good. But no one has ever said that they wanted to be friends with us. This is interesting. And the answer? The answer is... Tanganak smiled. We don't know how to treat close friends. So, it would be good if Mount Hua could tell us what it means to be friends. Chung Myung chuckled. It isn't that difficult. Then that's good. Tanganak smiled and nodded his head. So unfamiliar. Friend. A friend. It was something he hadn't imagined at all. But this childish term tickled Tanganak's heart. It was even more so because these words had come from the strangest person he had ever seen. I accept these 3 conditions. Yes, then. I understand that the alliance between the Tang family and Mount Hua has been established. The question now is whether Mount Hua will accept this. Write a letter. Send it to Mount Hua with my seal and it'll work out. Is your influence in Mount Hua that huge? No. Rather... Huh? Chung Myung spoke. The sect leader and the elders are people who had been ignored all this time. If they know the Tang family situation, they will shed tears and ask whether you guys are happy with these conditions. Tanganak's cheeks trembled. To be treated like pitiful people. Well, I understand. Then, with this, where are you going? Tanganak, who flinched at Chung Myung's question, looked at him. Is there anything left? I need to go and get things done. We have to negotiate. Didn't we do that a while ago? Ah, that was with Mount Hua's representative. Chung Myung poked his finger somewhere. This. It was at the wound. Now, Chung Myung's finger was in contact with the red scar. Tanganak's eyes trembled. Didn't we give you the pill? Eh? This is a huge wound. You're trying to get one up over a man who had barely escaped death with just one pill? One pill for a life that had almost been lost? I survived just because it was me. But if it was someone else in my place, if it was anyone else, they would have died. But you just want to throw a pill at the wounded man and wipe his blood off your hands? No. Ugh. The way the Tang family deals with their friends is really cold. They act like they will give anything, but this isn't what a friend is. A person must have faith. Tanganak's face turned bright red. What do you want? Can I just say it? I cannot bear to hear you say that the Tang family has no faith. Tell me what it is. What do you want? Ah, okay. Chung Myung blinked his eyes. But it isn't easy. Just say it. Chung Myung searched the robe he took off. Let's see. It was here. Ah, here. Huh? What? A book. Chung Myung smiled as he held that book to Tanganak. It would be too long to put it into words, so I wrote it in advance. You don't have to praise me for being prepared. This is basic. We are both comfortable here. Tanganak realized then the anger which was forming in his mouth. He realized that it was something that happens only when a person meets a devil. After a while, the members of the Tang family who saw Tanganak coming out of his office walking around were all talking about how their lord has been walking around with a crazy face they had never seen before. Return of the Mount Hua Sect, Chapter 202. Let's just call it my whim. An alliance. Baekchun looked at Chung Myung with a puzzled expression on his face. He did expect that something like this would happen, but so suddenly. No, he disappeared for a while we were eating, and this is what he says after he comes back. A tale of an alliance. And that too. An alliance between the Mount Hua Sect and the Tang family. Yunjong had his mouth open as he said, "Ah, no, wait a minute. Can we just make such decisions on our own?" To be precise, the sect leader had told them they could make decisions as they pleased, but Yunjong wasn't able to calm himself. Why can't we? We have Sasuk here, don't we? Huh? Baekchun Sasuk? What about the Sasuk? Did you forget? When we were on our way out, the sect leader said that he entrusted the power of Mount Hua to Baekchun Sasuk. Huh? Ah, he did. He obviously said it. But you used that in here. Baekchun's eyes widened. Ah, wait. We don't even know what will happen in Nanman Beast Palace. Hyunjong's intention to entrust all the authority to Baekchun was so that the disciples of Mount Hua could move with confidence. Especially since the communication between the two places wasn't that smooth. Forming an alliance with the Tang family couldn't have ever been in the calculations of the sect leader. Yeah, what would the sect leader say if he knew we made an alliance like this? He will be happy. Right, of course, he will. No, damn it, he wouldn't. Baekchun grabbed his head. Please, one step at a time, Chung Myung. Don't keep jumping up. Just one step. The people who are following you, you should think about them too. What kind of alliance are you signing up for after just having a meal? Baekchun took a deep breath. The disciples of Mount Hua were all dumbfounded. This was an alliance with the Tang family. Who would have imagined things would come this far? Who here didn't know that the Tang family had a good view of Chung Myung? If Chung Myung did something bad, Baekchun would have to fix it. Putting off the shock aside, he took a deep breath to digest the news. The results aren't that bad. No, it isn't just that. This was a huge benefit. If the Tang family, one of the 5 great families, can be attained as an ally, Mount Hua can truly grow wings. To be honest, it was hard to understand why the Tang family forged an alliance with Mount Hua. So, Welcoming them with 2 hands wasn't enough. Baekchun frowned. Things in this world cannot be this simple. Baekchun, who had thought that, opened his mouth in a serious tone. First of all, you did well. Huh? Baekchun looked at Chung Myung and nodded his head. I don't know if you talked this through with the Lord, but it is a good thing that we managed to get this kind of result. It was an outcome of your hard work. Sasuk, did you eat something wrong? Maybe the food of Sichuan didn't sit well with you. Or did you get hit with poison from the Tang family? Why are you saying things you had never said before? Can't this stupid brat take a compliment? Baekchun, who was walking back, took a deep breath and suppressed his anger, and spoke as calmly as he could. But there is something off. Huh? Mount Hua has traditionally been alone for generations, even in the past. It means there is no history of them holding hands with any of the 5 great families. It isn't like you don't know about the subtle conflicts of the 9 great sects and the 5 great families. Well, that's right. Chung Myung shrugged his shoulders. There was no way he didn't know. Wasn't that why he decided to hold hands with the Tang family in the first place? To break down the conflicts. Although they weren't officially a part of any of the factions, the 9 great sects and the 5 great families, who had no enemies in this time period, were always aiming for one another. If we work with the Tang family, it may be of great help to the present Mount Hua. But it may become a problem for Mount Hua one day when we go back to being a part of the 9 great sects. Baekchun looked at Chung Myung and said, Have you thought that far before you did this? Chung Myung looked at Baekchun with strange eyes. Sasuk, I have something to ask you. What is so good about returning to the 9 great sects? Huh? Baekchun looked at Chung Myung like he couldn't understand his question. Chung Myung tilted his head. Can't you find any good reason? Baekchun hesitated. It wasn't that he didn't think about it. It was because he couldn't think of what to say. The reputation of being one of the 9 great sects has more of a ripple effect than you think. Even if everything is set aside, we can gather excellent disciples, and speaking of our power, it will definitely increase in the world. And is that worth more than the alliance with the Tang family? Right now, the benefits with the alliance are huge. However, if you choose to have an alliance, it is probably something to be done with a member of the 9 great sects rather than one of the 5 great. Sasuk! Huh? Does Sasuk have no pride? Baekchun narrowed his eyes. What are you talking about? Who kicked us out of the 9 great sects? It was the 9 great sects. It was those bastards. Those bastards kicked us out of the union. But now that we are getting stronger, will they come and ask us to take our seat in the union again? As if they want us to forget everything they did to us in the past. No, I'm not that kind of person. Chung Myung's eyes were shining brightly as he spoke. Are you going to bow your heads to those bastards? Don't fucking joke around. After risking my life, after giving up all the lives in our Mount Hua to save other people, those bastards are the people who didn't even replicate the grace we had shown to them. If Dao De Tianjun had experienced something like this, he would have struck Baekchun on the back of his head with his staff. But because it was Chung Myung, he was holding back. No way. Don't have strange thoughts, Sasuk. If those old men were in a state where they helped those who needed help, Mount Hua wouldn't have been like this. Baekchun shut his mouth. There was nothing wrong with Chung Myung's words. If the 9 great sects had helped them even just a little, Mount Hua wouldn't have fallen this far. Chung Myung had no intention of rejoining their union. He knew the sects were all a facade. I don't care if they call themselves the 9 great sects one union. The important thing was to have people who help you when you need it, and not a superficial relationship that always aimed for the other's backs. Then you mean, unlike the 9 great sects, the relationship with the Tang family can help us in our time of need. We should make it so, Chung Myung said firmly. There is no such thing as a relationship which only gives gains. There are only relationships of equal exchange, and the Tang family are people who will help Mount Hua when we need them most. Baekchun looked at Chung Myung and nodded his head. If he thinks like that, then... Baek-chun sighed. It wasn't easy for him to accept Chung Myung's opinion, because for him, Chung Myung was the most trusted person, but at the same time, the most untrustworthy one too. There is nothing we lose from this, right? Chung Myung looked at Baek-chun. Sasuk. What can we lose from an alliance? Aren't you being too overconfident in the sect? Mount Hua is the sect that had just made its way out of the shithole we were in. A beggar doesn't get rich just because he picked up a couple of gold ingots. Baek-chun groaned. He was right. Although good things have happened recently, Mount Hua is still a sect that is on the verge of ruin. It hadn't regained its former glory yet. If one looked at it calmly, it made no sense for even the 5 great families to reach out to Mount Hua. Baek-chun, who was constantly in thought, soon nodded his head. Let's go with it then. Sayoung, is it really fine? Yui, Sol, and Yinjong raised their voices at Baek-chun's decision, but Baek-chun was adamant about his decision. Calm down. I was scared because he was the one who brought up the alliance. If it is like this, it is still good news. Yes, but it doesn't matter how much they gain from this alliance. Is it really okay for us to decide this on our own without asking the elders? Baek-chun frowned. It isn't that I haven't thought of that, but the timing is also an important thing. If we waste our time here, then we will ruin the alliance. After all, I have the authority that was given to me by the sect leader. Nevertheless, we should quickly write the alliance terms and send them to Mount Hua. Chung Myung will check if what is written is right. Is this really fine? I will take all responsibility. Yunjong nodded at Baek-chun's words. Yes, Sasuk. Baek-chun glanced at Chung Myung. Damn bastard. He really was one. What would the grown-ups do? This isn't normal. I might have to take some time and think about. Think what? It says that the Tang family wants an alliance with Mount Hua. Who are we to even worry about the damn conditions? Chung Myung is helping us out again. Don't get too caught up with your stupid questions and say yes right away. Baek-chun smiled as he thought about what would likely happen. Even if there is a problem, Elder Hyun-young will solve it. Once he comes to know Chung Myung was the one who did it, he would make sure to go all out in support of him. So, this shouldn't be too far from it. Then, is the work with the Tang family done? Yes, now we need to head to Yunnan. Chung Myung looked at Jogul. Sayoung, are the preparations for heading to Yunnan done? Jogul's face changed in an instant. Chung Myung, the thing is... Huh? Why? Did they leave? Cold sweat formed on Jogul's forehead. No. Oh? There's no one going. What? Last time, we were told to join the group heading to Yunnan, right? My father lied to us to get us out of Chengdu. It is said that he gathered the merchants and asked them to accompany us to the top and then make us come down. So, to fake the climb? Right. Jogul glanced at Chung Myung. Knowing that Jo Pyong had lied, he knew how ruthless the words from Chung Myung would be. But the words from Chung Myung were different. A real merchant. Even in that situation, he was trying to avoid it by lying. A compliment? Or was it an insult? Well, he was worried for his son. It can happen. Anyway, are there no groups heading to Yunnan? No, there are. But because heading to Yunnan is a huge thing, and there is a limit to it, it is said that it would take a month before a new group forms. But can't we bring it forward? Even if we try, it wouldn't be too fast. Then we will be too late. Chung Myung scratched his head. A lot of time was wasted because of the Tang family. Delaying it any more would become difficult, and the sect leader and the elders in Mount Hua would have already started waiting for them to come back. Baek-chun also frowned at this and was perhaps thinking the same thing. Can we use another group heading there? It won't be easy. The ascent to Yunnan is for limited people. Only a handful of merchant unions have the rights to participate. And if anything goes wrong, they can never trade with Yunnan again. Right. It was unreasonable to put this pressure on Jogo's father. Then how? Well, then there is nothing we can do but solve it ourselves. Everyone turned to Chung Myung. What do you mean? Don't worry. We don't have to worry. Huh? Chung Myung smirked. Wouldn't friends help us at such times? Huh? Jogo looked at Chung Myung with blank eyes. Bang! Tangana closed his eyes tightly. He was in his office. He wondered if there were any people with such a temper in the family. But no one could dare open the office of the Lord like that, especially without even announcing who it was. And that... I have one more condition! Tanganak, who was shocked when the door was kicked open, no, at the person who came in, asked. No, it isn't a condition, but a request. Please find a way for us to head to Yunnan. We need to go to Yunnan. Since we don't have much time, hurry, please. Apparently, the word please was used differently in Shaanxi than in Sichuan. The person requesting him for a favor was shouting at him as if he had the upper hand. Just until Yunnan. No, we need to go deeper, to the Nanman Beast Palace. Chung Myung smiled as he looked at the man. I heard that it wouldn't be easy. Still, if it is the Tang family, it can be done, right? You're the Tang family, so it should be fine. It is possible, right? Me. Huh? Tanganak's face seemed as if he had his soul drained from him. Better you kill me, you rotten human. For the first time in his life, Tanganak regretted having the position of the Lord. Return of the Mount Hua Sect, Chapter 203. Let's just call it my whim. What is the Lord even thinking? At the round table, Tanganak went stiff as he heard that. Damned old men. The Tang family was a sect of blood. Sometimes, that was what made the Tang family so special and also different from the other sects. Because it was completely centered around blood ties, it had a bond that couldn't be compared to sects. However, it doesn't always have advantages. Being centered around blood meant that the opinions of older people were given more weight. If it was an ordinary sect, elders who stepped down from their posts to complete their own martial arts tried to get involved in the matters of the family, and it was similar here as well. The elders of the Tang family, whose positions of power in the family had already expired, now held a position where they advised the Lord, and the place where they all usually gathered was the family hall. In the past, this was a gathering merely to advise the Lord. However, as years passed, the elders all became equal to the Lord. No, rather, it was like they had more say in things. Even if Tanganak was the Lord who had absolute authority within the family, there was a limit when it came to wielding that authority over his uncles and other older people. An alliance with Mount Hua. Not Udang or the Jungnam sect, but Mount Hua. What the hell were you thinking? Tanganak frowned as he looked at the elders shouting. And so, the fight started. Could it be called a fight? Tanganak, unable to bear the rush of angry voices that were directed at him, was about to say something. But before he could even open his mouth, someone's soft voice pierced through the heavy atmosphere. Let's all calm down and listen to the Lord first. But, won't you listen to my words? Sorry. The elder, whose name was Tangwei, looked at them and then at Tanganak. Lord, tell us now, what were you thinking? There was a lot of leeway in his voice. Tanganak cleared his throat, making sure there was no hostility. Mount Hua is worthy of an alliance with us. Tangwei looked at Tanganak and said, It is strange. And with cold eyes he said, Unless the Lord's eyes were clouded, I don't know how he could come to such an evaluation. Did Mount Hua regain its old status without my knowledge? If not, with a scornful voice, Tang Wei continued, has the Tang family fallen in power without me knowing about it? Knowing that this was obvious ridicule, Tanggenak held back. I will say it again. I saw potential in Mount Hua. They both looked at each other. One was the lord of the Tang family, and the other was someone who represented the elders of the family and the other people too. The two men with the most authority kept looking at each other. Good for Mount Hua. I heard that Tangpe was taken down from the position of the successor. Tanggenak didn't expect this story to come out, so he nodded. You decided it on your own. Tanggenak didn't answer and looked at Tang Wei, and then nodded again. I did. Are you saying that the Lord decided that on his own? Then will you be happy if I put Tangpe back online to become the successor? At those sharp words, Tang Wei smiled. Lord, the words we say are from our hearts, the hearts which worry about the future of the family. We aren't doing this to rile you up. Tanggenak bit his lip. This is what old people blinded by power are like. If they really lived for the Tang family, they wouldn't be trying to put their fingers into each decision Tanggenak was making. But all the elders were corrupted by the powers they possessed. Since they had no hope of expanding further from Sichuan, they were all focused on sharing power within the family, even if it meant that it would limit the power of the Lord. First, let's hear the reason Tangpe was taken down from the position. It is because he isn't fit for it. Isn't fit? Yes. Tanggenak spoke firmly. I judged him to be inappropriate to hold the role of a lord in the future. It would be better to take away the role of successor from him as soon as possible. This decision will prove to be good for the growth of Tangpe too. Then who are you planning to put in that position? One of his younger siblings. Tang Wei's eyes narrowed. Your arrogance pierces the sky. Tang Wei was someone who had ascended the position of the successor, but at the discretion of his elders, he gave up the seat to his younger brother and stepped down. That younger brother was Tanggenak's father. It was unknown whether it was just a coincidence or intentional, but now Tanggenak wanted to take down Tangpe, who was the first in line. Isn't Tangpe skilled enough? Tanggenak firmly shook his head. He is lacking. Tangpe is. Yes, in the past, I would have never discussed about taking Tangpe from the position, but Tanggenak bit his lip and said, I have seen with my own eyes how lacking Tangpe is, so I cannot compromise this. Are you talking about Mount Hua's divine dragon? Yes. Tang Wei looked at Tanggenak. His eyes shone brightly. Then you mean that the abilities are important above all, right? Exactly. Then, Tang Wei smiled. Then it doesn't have to be the child of the Lord. Tanggenak's eyes twitched. This was a sensitive area. It was obvious what he was aiming for with this. However, if he denied it, it would mean he was changing the past words. A child with the right abilities and the surname of Tang can become the successor. Tang Wei smiled. I am truly amazed how broad the Lord's thinking is. With one word, you have proved that this wasn't because of personal greed. Tang Wei looked at Tanggenak. However, Tanggenak knew that this meant that Tang Wei wasn't on his side. Then, if there is a person who exceeds Mount Hua's divine dragon among the children of the Tang family, you have no objection to putting them in the position of successor. Tanggenak looked at Tang Wei, who was speaking his true feelings. I heard that this child, called Chung Myung, who is in our mansion, is slated to become a possible best in the world. Right. Then there is no better standard than the child. How about it? Why don't we have a spar with that child and give our children a chance to become the new successor? Tanggenak laughed. It would have been impossible for him in the past to even smile in front of these old men, but now he couldn't help but laugh. Lord, it looks like the elders are all making a mistake. Tangnak spoke in a sarcastic way. There is no child in the Tang family who can go against Mount Hua's divine dragon. At Tangnak's words, Tang Wei smiled. I heard about how the Lord was humiliated by that child. Don't think that you know everything. The children of the Tang family aren't weak. Tangnak said, there is no need to keep going in circles. Get to the point. Tang Wei frowned at it. If the Lord says that, the old man cannot speak anymore. How about it? Let Tanghak go against that child, Chung Myung. Tanghak. Right. If Tanghak wins, of course, he will be in the fight for the successor position. Right? Tangnak smiled. You seem to want to make Tanghak the successor. And you said you wouldn't even give special treatment to your grandson. I am only speaking about his abilities. Do you think that child will be able to surpass Mount Hua's divine dragon? Isn't the Lord thinking that because the Lord doesn't know to trust his family? The words coming out of his mouth were like daggers. Good. But Tangnak spoke with a smirk. Gambling requires a stake, and challenges come with a price. How about adding a bet? A bet? Yes. Tangnak spoke firmly. If Tanghak wins the spar, I will give the elders the authority to appoint him as the successor. Oh? Tang Wei went wide-eyed. This meant that if Tanghak won, he could be directly placed as the successor. The successor would then become the Lord. This wasn't any different from saying that the power of appointing the successor would fall into the hands of the elders. Instead, if Mount Hua's divine dragon wins, the elders will never interfere with my power or my decision until I step down from my position. So, does that sound good? Are you willing to accept it? As the talks went on, and the bets that were placed were huge, the elders began to whisper. It sounds like he has a card. Sounds dangerous. It is dangerous for both. However, Tang Wei seemed to have a different opinion. Good. Elder! Despite the words of those around him, he didn't waver, and Tangnak nodded his head. Then I will prepare it. I will make sure that the spar happens tomorrow. Sure. Then Tangnak bowed his head and left the room. As soon as he disappeared, the elders' voices turned into a roar. Is he fine? What did he say? Does he think Tanghak will lose to Mount Hua's divine dragon? That won't happen. Pathetic people. Tang Wei shook his head. Opportunities aren't given but created. If not now, when will we get the chance to seize power from the Lord ever again? True, but Tang Wei looked around. Worthless beings. Everyone was so blinded by small gains that they were unable to do anything huge. He was worried about the things which would happen, but there is no way. The results would be a perfect win. Wasn't that something every old man in the room should have realized by now? If one wanted to achieve something big, one had to risk everything to get that chance. This is my one and only chance to have my grandson as the successor. Tang Wei didn't want to miss this. He would be able to see his grandson take the position of successor and then become the Lord from there. But can Tanghak defeat Mount Hua's divine dragon? He isn't called all those names for nothing. Don't worry. It isn't that I am underestimating that child. No, it isn't that. After all, he is someone who made the Lord fall into his arms. Then, first, the child has suffered serious wounds in his spar with the Lord, and there is no way the injury has already healed. That is true. Secondly, the only thing he experienced was the throwing blades. That means he didn't experience the real power of the Tang family. The elders nodded their heads. The true power of the Tang family. All those who were present here knew what it was. Finally, Tang Wei looked at everyone. It is necessary to produce results by any means necessary. Isn't that the way of the Tang family? I hope that child will be able to at least stand on the battleground. Then we'll be able to see a good show. The elders who understood it turned to each other. There was a bit of guilt and a bit of shock, but it was all overshadowed by the lust which followed, the lust for power. Don't worry, Mount Hua's divine dragon won't be able to walk out of the house on his 2 feet. A smile crept onto the lips of Tang Wei. I have no personal grudges against you, but I think it is your misfortune to meet the Tang family. Return of the Mount Hua Sect. Chapter 204. Let's just call it my whim. Just stay there for a second. No, what is it with this leech? Chung Myung took off right away, and Tang So-so was chasing behind him. It was weird, bizarre even. Of course, Tang So-so was the daughter of Lord Tang. Even if she didn't have her family's legacy passed down to her, and her foundation in martial arts was weak, her using a footwork technique wasn't a strange thing. The actual strange thing was, what kind of person wearing a skirt can run this fast? Running at that speed with so many ornaments on their body, with movements which would be difficult for a woman, and all of that being done so elegantly. Chung Myung didn't want to know the truth behind this. Seriously, just stand still for a bit. You think it will just end if you run from here? I'm going to come to Mount Hua to kill you. Chung Myung finally took a deep breath and stood still, and then looked at Tang So-so. Finally, you stopped. Tang So-so came and stood in front of him, took a deep breath, and pulled out something small wrapped around her waist. A bottle? Tang So-so took out a bottle and a glass, and then poured tea in it and gave it to Chung Myung. Have this. What is this? A refreshing tea. You must have been thirsty from running away, so have something cool. Chung Myung closed his eyes. Did this woman prepare this as she chased after me? She is seriously unique. Hurry! Chung Myung took the tea offered by Tang So-so and drank it all the way down. The tea was really cool. Seeing that, Tang So-so smiled. Refreshing, right? Now, let's talk frankly. Why are you running around as if you hate me? Chung Myung frowned. I'm not scared of you. It is the marriage I'm scared of. Usually, when such stories of arranged marriages come up, in most cases, the women cry and scream, saying that they don't like it. Why are you so active in this? It is so difficult to convince these seriously unique people who keep coming into my life. Am I ugly? Not that. Does my personality seem bad? Doesn't look like it. Then why do you keep running away like that? It is rare to find a match like me. A pretty face, a good personality, and a strong family. It's all true, but you don't have to overdo it. It was excessive. Of course, it might have been difficult for others, but the Tang family behind her surely was an amazing family to get. Damn it! I would rather just die! I'm sorry, but. Yes? I really don't have any intention of getting married. Everyone is like that, but they change their mind later. I am a Taoist. I heard Mount Hua allows their disciples to get married. True, but I don't have any intention of doing so. Chung Myung spoke firmly. After all, we don't know each other, so don't waste your time in vain. Find a better marriage partner, because I never want to get married. And Tang So-so looked at Chung Myung with a strange look. It cannot be that, right? Do you have feelings for that Sago? Huh? Tang Soso pointed her fingers at Chung Myung. And that is why you're trying to push me away, right? Wow, how far would she take this? Obviously, she is pretty. There is no way any man can resist a beautiful woman like her. Chung Myung sighed. Oh, do you know how old I am? I'm old. A beauty? Oh, she is a beauty. But if I got married, then the woman would have to call me grandfather. No matter who he messed with, he could never joke around with someone who was only old enough to be his granddaughter. What? Beauty? Chung Myung smiled. Who could understand his situation? When Chung Myung didn't give an answer to her, Tang Soso clenched her fist. Am I right? Don't speak. Chung Myung took a deep breath. I just have no thought of marriage and stuff, so don't bother me and look for someone else. Do you think I'll just give up? Huh? I'm desperate too. I will show you my charms. Don't bother. I am older than you. Tang Soso looked at Chung Myung and he sighed. Can't you just give up? It wasn't like he could just kill people because they were annoying, right? Maybe if there was a proper reason. Idiot. The stupidest in the world. I won't. Huh? Nothing. Chung Myung waved his hands. Don't run away and come here today. Let's talk a little more calmly. If we go to a good tea house in Chengdu, have a cup of tea, and watch the sunset together, you will develop feelings of love that didn't exist before. No, I don't want to. It was then. Nuna. Huh? Tang Soso turned her head at the voice and saw Tangjan approaching them. The Lord is looking for disciple Chung Myung. Why? Tang Soso frowned. She was hoping to make sure this happened later, but Tangjan spoke with a firm face. It seems to be important. As if she didn't like it, Tang Soso looked at Chung Myung and said, Is it really that important? You can take this to the Lord and ask him directly. Well, done. Yes, Nuna. You take disciple Chung Myung to Father and hold on to him and make sure he doesn't run away. After that is over, bring him to my place. Get it? Yes. Tang Soso nodded and made way for Chung Myung to leave. But before that, she didn't forget to add on to her words from before. Don't go anywhere else and bring him to me straight away. Chung Myung followed Tangjan with a face that seemed to have lost all emotions, and Tangjan looked sadly at him. Must be tough, right? Senses. Huh? Not a single person in the Tang family is in their right senses. It was a sad statement that couldn't be countered by Tangjan. Tang Soso, who looked at the back of the people who were just with her, bit her lip. I don't have time. Soon, Chung Myung would leave, and although she was desperately holding on to him, he wasn't even responding to her. Moreover, the moment the man leaves, her chance for freedom would also crumble upon itself. I need to do No. Tang Soso became startled at the voice that came from behind her. After confirming the voice of the person, she lowered her hand with a sigh. What is it? Let's talk. Yu Yi-sol looked at her firmly and said, I need to talk to you. She seems a bit strange. She threw a stone, which created a ripple in the pond. Tang Soso looked silently at the spreading waves. I get it. It is hard to see, right? But it isn't because I like doing it. Do you get it? It looks like I'm trying to flirt with him, which might make me look a little rude. A sajil. He's just my sajil. Tang Soso tilted her head and looked at Yu Yi-sol. It was difficult to know what this woman in front of her was thinking. She was a woman who had enough beauty to make people forget about everything in the world. No relationships, right? Yes. He doesn't show any feelings for a woman who is as beautiful as you? He only shows interest in martial arts. Oh my! Even if he was a Taoist, how was this possible? Phew. That is tough. Like Yu Yi-sol said, Chung Myung really didn't seem to show any interest in them, which meant that she wouldn't be able to entice him and get married. It is my loss. Tang So-so took a deep breath, and Yu Yi-sol looked at her and said, You don't seem to have feelings for him either. Am I wrong? Tang So-so nodded her head. Don't get me wrong. I didn't mean to take advantage of him. I really wanted to do my best and get married to him. It did look like that. But it seems like a lost cause. Yu Yi-sol looked at her and said, Why are you so obsessed with marriage? Huh? I think you are good enough, even if you don't get married. Tang So-so burst into laughter at that. Everyone who saw her life from the outside would have probably thought that. Do you know what kind of place the Tang family is? The rules of the family are strict. There is only one path for me from here, getting married to a groom whom the Lord wants. What I'm doing now is a little rebellion against it. I will be forced to get married either way. If I'm going to get married, I want to do it on my terms. I need to like that family too. Other ways. There is no other way. This is the Sichuan Tang family. A woman from the Sichuan Tang family can neither learn the legacy of the family nor live as she wants, especially if she is the daughter of the Lord. Tang So-so shrugged her shoulders. Well, it isn't like I have great dissatisfaction. Thanks to the status of being the daughter of the Lord, I have been treated well. If I think of this as the price I have to pay, it makes me feel relieved. But... She looked at the pond far from them and said, It is just... She sighed. Yu Yi-sol looked at the face of Tang So-so, dyed in the setting sun, and she said, There is a way. Huh? There is always a way. It is just that you aren't thinking about it. Tang So-so bit her lip. Stop talking as if you know everything. I don't need to be comforted like this. I will open it up. That path. At that, Tang So-so looked at Yu Yi-sol wide-eyed. She will open the way? Yu Yi-sol? Regardless of whether it was possible or not, there was another even bigger question. Why would you help me? Because I was the same, without being able to see my path. No matter how hard she tried, it felt blocked. But whether her path opened up one day, she walked to Mount Hua on her own feet. The messiest road in the world. And now she never got lost. So, there's nothing different. She looked at Tang So-so with a determined face. At least you can make other choices. Tang So-so, who was staring at Yu Yi-sol, stretched out her hand. And Yu Yi-sol took it up. Comrades, let's see to the bottom of this. Sure. Tang So-so smiled brightly. But can I ask you one thing? Ask. Do you really have no relationship with that man? Really? After a low sigh, Yu Yi-sol turned and headed back to her room. It doesn't matter. Tang So-so wasn't going to back out now. Chung Myung closed the door and stared at Tang Genak. You look busy. All thanks to someone. I won't apologize. Chung Myung took a deep breath and sat across from Tang Genak. So why did you call for me? Tang Genak took a moment to choose his words and then sighed as he spoke with a heavy voice. I have a request to make. Huh? Request? Chung Myung narrowed his eyes. What? Are you seriously doing this? For giving me one pill? It isn't that. Tang Genak raised his hand and touched his forehead. Since the talks about that have already happened, let's deal with this matter first. We have already secured the route for your travel. We are preparing the route from Chengdu to Yunnan too. I told you that would make it happen. When? Probably the next day or so. Oh, faster than I expected. Thank you. Tang Genak let out a sigh. And my request. Yes? What happened is... Tang Genak began to speak about everything that happened in the elders' meeting. He abstained from saying some things and added some other things, but he made sure to not sway too much from what happened. He recounted the conflict between him and them to Chung Myung. It'll be fine. Chung Myung wanted to be close with the Tang family, And if he was a true friend, he would accept the request coming from his side calmly. And that happened. Tanggenak looked at Chung Myung. If it was the Chung Myung he knew, he would try to... Tanggenak flinched. On the face of the child sitting in front of him, there was an expression he had never seen before. So, a low voice escaped from his mouth. It sounds like the elders are holding the Lord by your ankles. It is true. Ankles. Chung Myung's lips twitched. If I had trusted and supported my father, rather than going against what they said, maybe they would have been a little stronger. And then maybe I could have saved another. So, after this war ends, this time, I will head back to help the Lord a little. I have been given the title of elder, but I have never really taken good care of them. Of course, there is no way you brought me here. The dead are already dead. There is no such thing as carrying out the will of the dead. Yet, Chung Myung couldn't ignore this because of the memory in his mind. You called it a request? Yes. I refuse it. Tanggenak had a disappointed face. He couldn't force this child. Instead, Chung Myung's eyes shone brightly. I will give you a present. A present? Yes. Chung Myung nodded his head. However, this wasn't a present from Chung Myung. He was just passing the present from someone else. This was a gift that would be given after a long period of time, and it would be from an elder of the family, Tangbo, to the present Lord, Tanggenak. Please proceed as planned, and no matter what I do that day, do not get involved. What are you going to do? Well, it's simple. Chung Myung chuckled. I'll do what I do best. Return of the Mount Hua Sect. Chapter 205. Let's just call it my whim. Are you still that far behind? Do it! Do it already! Hurry up! What about the Kung Po chicken? I told you to make it a while ago, didn't I? Where is it? The people in the Sichuan Tang family were in a desperate battle. Didn't you say it was for 5 people? It seems like we are making it for more than 20 people. And you want me to make more at this pace? Don't say that. Just one person was eating it all. All of this? Yes. Does he have some ghost attached to him? The chef's hands began to chop the vegetables faster. And among those chefs, a man stepped into the place very naturally. Seeing his attire, the chefs placed the food bowls and the bottles on the tray. Hurry it up! Carry this before it cools down! Yes! The man who had his head bowed down and his face concealed took the tray of food away. He walked out of the kitchen and glanced around as he shoved something into his hand. He took out a large bottle and a small bottle and then checked them. He likes to drink. And he sprinkled the powder in the small bottle evenly on the chicken and poured the liquid into the alcohol bottle. And with an innocent face, he began to calmly walk, pushing the tray forward. Arriving at the place where the Mount Hua disciples were, he coughed slightly and went inside without delay. Food is here. Again. I don't know if you eating all of this is great, or if the Tang family giving all of this to you is great. On the table in the center, there were numerous empty vessels. The man who brought the food arranged the vessels full of food in front of Chung Myung and took back the empty ones. Ugh, let's start again. Chung Myung whistled as he raised his chopsticks. Seeing that made Baek-chun frown. Are you seriously going to eat again? Then I'll give some to you as well. Have it. Aren't my words going into your ears? Ya, you bastard. After saying that you have a spar in the afternoon, is it fine to make your body heavy with all this food? It's fine. Isn't the food of Mount Hua tasty too? Why is it like you are someone who hasn't... Sasuk? Huh? That is food. And this is cooking. The words were subtly changed, but Baek-chun could understand what they meant. No matter how generously the meat and the best ingredients were being used, the kitchen of Mount Hua couldn't be compared with the Tang family. Weren't the dishes in the Sichuan Tang family made by the best chefs? Ugh, just one bite. At that moment, Chung Myung tilted his head. Huh? And he looked to the side. Huh? What is this? The smell is killer. Chung Myung's eyes fell on the freshly brought alcohol bottle, and he opened the cap to feel the scent coming from it. Without delay, Chung Myung reached for the drink and gulped it down. It's like the sound of someone dying. Still, it's good. Chung Myung looked at the bottle with wide eyes. Wow, what is this? It feels like silk against my tongue. Baekchun approached Chung Myung. Then give me one sip. Eh? How dare you try to get your hands on the bottle that another person took? I sipped it. Are you really losing it? It felt like the martial arts sects were aging backward. This chicken is like art. I want to take all the chefs in here to Mount Hua. Can Mount Hua even hire them? No, but my money can. Oh, holy heavens. Why did you drop such a man into Mount Hua? Seeing Chung Myung drink and eat everything that was served to him, the man who was waiting there took the empty bowls and left the room. Chung Myung wiped his lips with his sleeve and smiled, and leaned back as if he couldn't move. I overate. See? I told you not to do it. It's fine. I'm telling you. I can handle this much. Jogul frowned as he looked at the table. There's some left. It's a waste to send it back. I can eat it. The chopsticks of Chung Myung hit Jogul's right away. That's mine. Sahyung should have something else. Huh? Chung Myung smiled. This is the food the Tang family prepared for me. At his weird words, Jogul tilted his head. The news that Mount Hua's divine dragon and Tang Hak were going to spar had spread out rapidly throughout the Tang family. With Mount Hua's divine dragon, young Master Tang Hak will. What is this? Although young Master Tang Hak isn't the son of the Lord, isn't he the best among the young warriors of the Tang family? I agree with that, but it is still Mount Hua's divine dragon. Didn't the Lord also have a disappointing end with Mount Hua's divine dragon the other day? That is what the Lord had. Could it be that they are trying to do something to the young warrior of Mount Hua? Everyone had different opinions and thoughts, but everyone wanted to see the battle happen with their own eyes. For that reason, the central training hall where the spar was scheduled to be held was filled with people from the morning. Seeing the crowd, Tang Hak's heart began to beat rapidly. Gulp. Tang Hak took a deep breath. He calmed his pounding chest and clenched his fists. It was then. There is nothing for you to be nervous about. Tang Hak shook his head. His grandfather, the elder of the family, Tang Wei, walked toward him. I greet the great elder. There is no reason for all that. Call me Grandpa. Yes, grandfather. Tang Wei smiled. Are you confident? I haven't been neglecting my training, but the opponent is Mount Hua's divine dragon. He is known to be someone who is skilled. To be honest, I'm not even sure I can win. You useless child. You mean to say that you're scared of a child who is 10 years younger than you? It isn't that I'm scared. Don't worry. Sorry? Tang Wei smiled. Would I send my one and only grandson to his defeat? Mount Hua's divine dragon will be drugged, so don't waste your time and just quickly kill him. How can... Make sure. His eyes lit up fiercely and he continued. He doesn't live. Tang Hak knew what it meant and slowly nodded his head. Eventually, his lips too turned into a mean smile. I understand what you mean. Don't worry, I will make sure to keep him silent forever. Yes, sometimes poison is needed to get things done. The two people looked at each other with nasty smiles. If this goes well, you will rise to the position of the young lord, and then the position of lord will naturally be handed to you when the time comes. I don't know how to repay my grandfather's favor to me. You becoming the lord is enough repayment for me. The shackles on me will be lifted. Tang Wei turned around and looked at the people gathering in the hall. Do you see that? Yes, they are all the members of the Tang family. There are so many divisions between even blood brothers here. So how can these many people live as one family? What a true family head must possess isn't a soft and kind heart for the family. He needs to be sober in his thoughts and cold in his execution. He should only be able to see the benefits of the family. Make sure to understand this. Yes, grandfather. Tang Wei licked his lips. This is it. The report from his subordinate detailing that Chung Myung had taken the poison had reached him a while ago. Even if it's him, he cannot help but be affected by the poison. The 1,000 days taken was one of the special poisons used in the Tang family. Its characteristics were quite unique. If the two of them weren't used together, they wouldn't act as a poison. It was a simple liquid and powder when consumed separately. But when the two meet in the stomach, they mix and become a poison. And the person who actually takes it has their mind turned clouded as if they were drunk, and they become unable to raise their internal ki. It is the best kind of poison to use on an enemy before going to spar with them. The old man smiled and turned his head to see the Tang Lord seated way far from him. For that guy to be the Lord. No matter how much he wanted to support Chung Myung, did it make sense for the Lord of the Tang family to sit on the side of Mount Hua? I cannot leave the future of this family to someone like him. And by the end of today, the Tang family would have a new lord. He looked at the disciples of Mount Hua who were walking slowly towards the stage. Here they come! Mount Hua's divine dragon! Mount Hua's divine dragon! The members of the Tang family who had gathered for the spar looked at them. They couldn't boo or cheer for their people. Because Tanggenak took the side of Mount Hua, they couldn't cheer against Mount Hua even though their opponent was Tanghak. Are you ready? Yes, grandfather. Good. You should go with the flow. Get out there right now. Yes. Tanghak jumped in and proudly stood tall as he looked at the disciples of Mount Hua. This is where I become the young lord. He had to show his presence today. Mount Hua's divine dragon, step ahead. I will face you today and prove that the Tang family is above Wudang and Mount Hua. Whoa! Yes! As expected of the Tang family. At the dignified words of Tanghak, the members of the Tang family cheered. There were people who looked at Tanggenak in fear of his anger, but the man didn't show any reaction to it. And the disciples of Mount Hua. Huh? What are they doing? The eyes of the people focused on the disciples of Mount Hua. They must have heard Tanghak, but they were standing in a circle and whispering amongst themselves. Really? Is that fine? No, that... Fine. It's totally fine. Then, okay. After a long talk amongst themselves, a man stepped forward. People were amazed as they saw the man who walked up the stage with no fear. That person is Mount Hua's divine dragon, the one who will become the best in the world. What a great... Huh? Is Mount Hua's divine dragon a woman? Everyone's faces were stained with embarrassment. The person who appeared on the stage was a woman in Mount Hua's robe. Chung Myung's fame hadn't spread to Sichuan yet, but that didn't mean they didn't know the divine dragon was a man. Wasn't he supposed to deal with Mount Hua's divine dragon? Who is that woman? No, are they saying that a woman is going to deal with young Lord Tanghak? Are they openly looking down on our family? The people began to mumble. However, no matter how angry they were, they couldn't be angrier than Tanghak. The man let out a loud roar of anger. What the hell is this supposed to mean? He looked up at Yu Yisor, who had come up. I have decided to deal with Mount Hua's divine dragon. How dare a no-name woman like you come up here? I am Mount Hua's Yu Yisor. You don't seem to understand my words. Where is Mount Hua's divine dragon? At that moment, one of the disciples of Mount Hua came forward. Me? Chung Myung came up, looking like he was very annoyed for some reason, and seeing that, Tang Hak couldn't hide his dismay. Aren't you supposed to spar with me? Ah, true, but just do this. What do this? Chung Myung patted his bloated stomach. I ate too much and I have indigestion. Overate? Are you saying that a warrior ate too much? The Tang family's food is very delicious. This was absurd. No, it was too ridiculous to even call it absurd. In the midst of this, what was even more absurd was the presence of Mount Hua's divine dragon. I see. Tanganak mumbled and nodded his head. Doesn't Mount Hua have any shame? Seriously, you're so strange. You're saying that we don't have any shame? What? Chung Myung smiled. You want to spar with me? Yes. But what is your qualification? Tang Hak's eyes fluttered. I am Mount Hua's divine dragon. Chung Myung held out his swollen stomach. Bounce, bounce. Just how much did he have to eat for? No, that isn't important right now. Am I bragging about my fame with my own mouth? I am not a warrior obsessed with his own fame. What nonsense is that? It seems like you 5 people seem to think that it is fine to mess with our family. No, that wasn't right. This was the Sichuan Tang family. How do you think I got this fame? I got it by running around with my bare feet while sweating like a dog. I was on the verge of death every time. But what now? A spar? From a man whose name I have never even heard of. Chung Myung looked at him. He had an expression of ridicule on his face. Don't be fooled. Even a spar requires a minimum qualification. Just saying, sir who is passing by, accept the spar, doesn't work for someone as obscure as you, even if you're from the Sichuan Tang family. Tang Hak, who was unable to make an excuse as he heard that, went silent. You seem to think that I got this title by messing around in back alleys. Looks like you misunderstand my hard work. Look at you, being so arrogant and ignorant that you call out my name in such a manner. Tang Hak's face contorted. Chung Myung then gestured to Yu Yi-sol. Don't worry, I'm a very generous person. If you can go against our Sago and win, I will deal with you. No, actually, that is annoying. Chung Myung chuckled. If you win over Sago, it means that we lose. Tang Hak's face turned blue. Are you telling me to fight a woman? Oh my! Chung Myung's eyes widened and he said, if you want to die, you can just put your head into a water tub. If you want to die from being hit, then... What? It was at that moment. Are you done? Tang Hak turned his head. Shring! Yu Yi-sol was pulling out her sword. If you are done, come fight. Tang Hak couldn't hold back his anger and his face trembled. These bastards who don't know their place. It was at that moment. Pah! Tang Hak lowered his head. He saw the sleeves of his clothes, which had been cut, falling to the floor. You talk too much. Tang Hak grunted his teeth at Yu Yi-sol's calm words. You don't even think about getting down from this stage alive. The tension between the two warriors built up rapidly. In that situation, one person mumbled to another. Same, I don't think you should be talking about someone boasting about themselves too much. Huh? What was that, Sasuk? Nothing. Baekchun slowly turned his head away. Return of the Mount Hua Sect, Chapter 206. This grandfather's rod is quite painful. Tang Hak was filled with anger to the point that he felt his head would burst soon. Are you making fun of me? Even more upsetting was the fact that he couldn't refute their words. He was not a nameless man, but his fame had barely spread across the land of the Tang family. It couldn't be compared to Mount Hua's divine dragon, which was a name that now resonated with the world. Who was Mount Hua's divine dragon? Wasn't he someone who had the best shot at being the best in the world? Someone who trampled on the 5 dragons despite being wounded. He was a person who was rumored to have defeated Mujin of the Wudang sect. No matter how shameless Tang Hak was, it was obvious that him calling Chung Myung for a spar was wrong. But did they have to openly poke fun at him? Don't they know of honor? It wasn't the behavior of a Taoist to openly discuss and ridicule the weaknesses of their opponents. How could a person with such a high status act like a local thug? Furthermore, how dare you send a woman against me? And even worse, if the woman loses, it is his defeat. Clench. Tang Hak clenched his fist so hard that his nails dug into the palm of his hand. Never once had he thought he would have to go against a woman. For those who lived in the Tang family, this was a natural thought, because in this family, women do not get to learn the family's legacy. But now, in front of him, there was a female swordsman of Mount Hua pointing her sword. "Lord!" Tang Hak shouted. "Are you acknowledging this?" Instead of answering, Tang Genak looked at Tang Hak, Yu Yisol, and Chung Myung. Checking the tired face of Chung Myung, he again looked at Tang Hak with an expressionless face. He must have his motives. It was true. Chung Myung was rude, inconsiderate, and filthy enough to touch other people's belongings, and was someone who even tried to take away the legacies of their families. Still, he isn't someone to shy away from a fight. It doesn't matter. Are you saying that if the woman loses, you will let me be the successor? Do you mean that I will take back my words? Tang Hak flinched at those words. Unable to find a way out, he turned his head to Tang Wei. That pathetic idiot. Tang Wei thought. If his grandson looked at him in front of so many people, wouldn't they know he was the one behind this? Of course, it was different from guessing and knowing it for certain, since a lot of people didn't have the brains to figure it out. What are you thinking, Mount Hua's divine dragon? You brat. Tang Wei looked at Chung Myung. There is no upset stomach. Does it make sense that the person with the name of Mount Hua's divine dragon would have an upset stomach from having just a little too much food? Was he really a master? Or did he notice the poison? That isn't possible, right? No, he couldn't have figured it out. But he must have noticed that his body was acting weird. So, he sent out the girl. Even if she didn't win, it would be justifiable. If the girl lost, Mount Hua would still be able to save face. It seems it won't be possible to kill Mount Hua's divine dragon here. It cannot be helped. First of all, I have to know if the poison was discovered or not. Of course, the Lord would be furious if it was discovered. But he wouldn't be able to take back his words by then. In that case, he would have to bend his back and work a little harder. We have to push him further. Tang Wei nodded. Tang Hak, who got the permission, looked at Yu Yisol. I will make you pay for the price of this arrogance. Yu Yisol took her stance and said, The disciples of Mount Hua do not fight with their mouths. Till the very end. Tang Hak clenched his teeth and shoved his hand into his pockets. Be careful. Tang Hak's eyes were dyed blue. I will be using poison in this spar. This wasn't because Tang Hak was someone who was kind enough to warn her, but anyone in the Tang family who used poison in the spar had to inform their opponent about it beforehand. That was the rule set by the family. Sure. However, Yu Yisol just calmly accepted his words, and then their eyes met. Tang Soso looked at the stage with a trembling face. What are you doing? She couldn't understand Yu Yisol. Just who was Tang Hak? Among the descendants of the Tang family, Tang Hak was said to be the best. Although he lost the chance to become the successor because he wasn't the son of the Lord, everyone knew that Tang Pe fell short of this man. And Yu Yisol would now have to deal with him. Stop it! Nuna! Tang Jan pulled the hem of her clothes. Calm down. If Nuna goes out now, they will all laugh at you.
But what if she cannot deal with him? If something goes wrong, she can lose her life.
Tang Soso desperately pleaded. Yu Yi-sol was the only person who understood her situation and wanted to help her. She didn't want such a person to fall at the hands of the Tang family's poison. Do you think she is standing up there without knowing that?
What?
She went up there knowing full well what might happen. She is a warrior. Do not disrespect her. From the moment one steps onto the stage, there is no difference between a man and a woman. It is one warrior against another. Do not interfere with that. Tang Soso's eyes trembled.
Then, to open the path.
Tang Soso looked at Yu Yi-sol. She looked at her expressionless face. Tang Hak shuddered as he saw her take a step forward. If you knew who I was, you wouldn't have dared to deal with. You talk a lot. Yu Yi-sol frowned. It wasn't like she hated talking. It was because this man was a nasty talker, the likes of which she hadn't seen anywhere in the world. And each word he said felt offensive. If you want to die, then I'll grant it. Tang Hak's hand touched his sleeve, and the slightly cut sleeves fluttered in the air. Be prepared. Tang Hak pulled out something at the speed of light, and dozens of needles flew towards Yu Yi-sol. Judging from the black color of the needles, they had to have had poison applied to them. Yu Yi-sol's sword moved slowly. Slowly. It was soft and graceful. It was more like a dance rather than swordsmanship. Yu Yi-sol's sword swept away the needles. It was appropriate to say that the sword had swept the needles away. The needles which came in with sharp force lost their force and fell to the ground abruptly. Surely they can't be done again. Tang Hak repeated his actions without delay. Swish! This time, it was blue daggers that flew towards Yu Yi-sol. The tip of Yu Yi-sol's sword was aimed precisely at them. And the moment they touched, her sword twisted lightly and hit the side of the daggers. As the sword was just to divert the weapons, the daggers went back to Tang Hak without losing their momentum. Tang Hak couldn't hide his shocked expression as he witnessed this unexpected situation. How dare you! Tang Hak's face was red. He felt ashamed seeing his own weapons coming back at him. He embraced the power of the ghost poison claw in his hand to the fullest to catch them out of the air. Swish! There was the sound of metal being scraped against metal as his hand collided with the knives. Recovering the daggers that had lost their force, Tang Hak went for it. But he didn't move hastily like before. I can do it. He didn't want to admit it, but this woman was stronger than he thought. When they said that Tangjan had been disgraced by Jogul, he thought that the disciples of Mount Hua were strong. But if you weren't a woman, you could have taken me down. This is the result of you not being born a man. Yu Yi-sol smiled. What is so funny? I was thinking. About what? About why you're so weak. You are a man, right? You! None of those things are important. The only important thing is... Yu Yi-sol's sword was aimed at Tang Hak's neck. If you are weak or not. Tang Hak couldn't control his anger anymore. He was looking at Yu Yi-sol with raging eyes. You must have a death wish. If that's what you want, I will grant it for you. Tang Hak's hand went into his sleeve. The difference was that this time it was a little deeper than before, and Tang Genak noticed it. The people of the Tang family were confident people who kept their daggers and poison needles in their sleeves. However, Tang Hak was different. Should I try it? He liked to use lethal poisons. If he did, then Yu Yi-sol would end up taking huge damage, and the outcome would be his win. Tang Hak suddenly pulled out his hand. Chak! There was a different sound from before. This was a clear noise, but nothing could be seen. But Yu Yi-sol swung her sword in a clear manner as if she could see something. Ka-ka-ka-kang! From her sword, small sparks could be noticed. What?
At that moment, the top people in the Tang family, the spectators, and the warriors of the family all jumped up, and then they all looked at the stage in anticipation. That! It was only after the flying object had fallen to the floor that they confirmed what it was. Cow hair needles. They were called as such because they were as thin as a cow's hair, and since it flew at high speed, no one could see it with their eyes. Yu Yi-seol too judged that it would be difficult to take them down one by one, so she used the blade of the sword and covered herself. But it wasn't perfect. Yu Yi-seol lowered the sword and bit her lip. She looked at her left shoulder. A fine thin needle that couldn't be seen with the naked eye was nailed into her flesh. There was just one, and she pulled it out. She wondered if there was anything wrong with being stabbed with one small needle, and she pulled it out. Seeing that the tip of the fine needle was stained black, she threw the needle to the floor. Poison. Her shoulder throbbed. The problem was that the pain was gradually increasing, and the range of pain she could feel was widening. At this rate, her left arm would soon go numb. You should have known to fear the Tang family. Tang Ha continued. If even one of them hits, you are done. The true power of the Tang family comes from our poison. If you ask for forgiveness now, I will spare you. Poison. Right. Are you so stupid to not even know your own body's condition? Yu Yi-seol mumbled. You seriously are stupid. What? You think you will stand until the poison spreads? You! With that, Yu Yi-seol rushed towards Tang Hak. Stupid bitch! You thought I wouldn't have thought of that. Tang Hak swung his arms wide. Some type of dust spread out from his sleeves and obscured the visibility on the stage. Broken soul sand. The sand, laden with poison, blocked Yu Yi-seol's attack path, and with time, this poison would affect her too. So, normally, now was the time people would retreat. But Tang Hak made a mistake. Mount Hua, at least the disciples who practiced along with Chung Myung, didn't know how to retreat. The tip of Yu Yi-seol's sword began to tremble, and then it bloomed. Her own plum blossom. Dozens of them began to bloom and swept the clouds created by the broken soul sand with a gust of wind. When Tang Hak saw the sand approaching him, he felt shocked. He was unlikely to be affected by the poison, but his vision would be obscured. Unable to find a place to move, he slammed the floor to jump up. But at that moment, Tang Hak had clearly seen it. The Plum Blossom Sword that suddenly rose up from the mist of the sand. His eyes widened like they would pop out. Why is it coming from there, in the middle of the sand? But he couldn't think anymore. The sword struck his face, which was exposed. Soon, he fell to the ground. Tang Hak shook his head to get rid of the pain, and in the place where the sand cleared, he could see Yu Yi-seol standing there with the clear dark aura on her face. Crit! Insane! She didn't move back to avoid the sand. She hid inside it and avoided the gaze of Tang Hak despite being poisoned. You are insane! I did tell you, Yu Yi-seol said calmly. You are weak. You don't get to say you are strong without ever having a proper fight. No matter how strong you are, there will be someone above you at all times. And he was never Yu Yi-seol's opponent. Tang Hak, who was about to get up, got hit in the head by Yu Yi-seol's sword and fell again. She began to hit him on the head with the sword repeatedly. Baekchun, who looked at it, mumbled. The head is... the head. Yoon-jong trembled as he looked at it. No, even when we were taught this way, did she have to perform it so openly? Their sorrow as they watched it couldn't be compared to the suffering of Tang Hak. Thud. And Tang Hak, who kept having his head pounded, fell to the ground. And seeing his entire body convulsing brought tears to the eyes of the others. You! At that moment, Sago, come on! Chung Myung suddenly got up on the stage and grabbed Yu Yi-sol and pulled her to him. The sooner the poison is treated, the better. Yu Yi-sol nodded and followed him down the stage. She looked back at Tang-hak lying down. Just a joke. And then looked at Chung Myung. He is so different. Although this seemed like a joke, Chung Myung took Yu Yi-sol and went to Tang Geun-hak and held out his hand. Give it to me, the antidote. Tang Geun-hak gave it to him right away without much thought. This should be fine. Chung Myung gave the medicine to Yu Yi-sol and then frowned. Why were you fighting so recklessly? I didn't want to breathe the same air as him. Huh? He felt glad Tang-hak hadn't heard this. Chung Myung nodded and turned around. The poison spreading will affect it if it isn't treated right, so do it right. What about you? Me? Chung Myung chuckled. I need to go and get my present. His gaze fell on Tang Wei, who was near the stage. Well, maybe I should say I'm giving a present to him. Chung Myung tapped the handle of his Plum Blossom Sword. Be prepared. This grandfather's rod is quite painful. Return of the Mount Hua Sect. Chapter 207. Grandfather's rod is quite painful to accept. The arena became extremely silent. He had lost. Tang-hak had lost. Everyone in the Tang family was at a loss for words as they came to terms with this reality. It wasn't even Mount Hua's divine dragon. To lose to a woman who was nothing more than a party member. Even though Yu Yi-sol was a disciple who was much older compared to Mount Hua's divine dragon, she was still way younger than Tang-hak. And what happened to Tang-hak? Those who watched it gulped. What had just transpired held a huge meaning. There were many sects in the world, but there were very few that were patriarchal like the Tang family. The Tang family was heartless and never passed their legacies to their daughters, no matter how much they loved them. And Tang-hak, who was regarded as the best in such a family, was defeated by a female disciple of Mount Hua. Tang So-so clenched her fist. We won! Her eyes trembled. Yu Yi-sol had defeated Tang-hak. It must have been shocking for others, but it was much more than just a surprise to Tang So-so. She had beaten Tang-hak. It was something that she had never even thought of. Of course, their conditions were different. Because she was born as the daughter of the Tang family and didn't have the legacy of the Tang family, she would never get to experience this. She would never be able to defeat Tang-hak. But Yu Yi-sol did it. Amazing! Tang So-so's face was blank as she looked at Yu Yi-sol. After looking at Yu Yi-sol, who was being treated because of the poison for a long time, she felt her body lighten up. Huh? Why is he going up there again? Chung Myung was walking up the stage. They had won the spar, so why? Chung Myung got on the stage and looked around. Naturally, everyone's eyes turned to him. Even though his figure attracted so many gazes, he didn't seem bothered. He was waiting for this moment. It was only around the time when most of the people didn't understand why he was there that Chung Myung opened his mouth. To be honest, he opened his mouth quietly in a voice which wasn't too high or low. I was expecting so much from the Sichuan Tang family. And he tilted his head. But I don't understand what this is. Everyone looked at Chung Myung with startled eyes. This was outright disrespect. Don't look at me with such angry faces. If you were in my position, you would think the same. Chung Myung pointed to Tang-hak, who was being carried away. Look! Everyone shut their mouths. The loser had no right to speak. It is the most basic requirement for a warrior to understand their own abilities and that of their opponent before a spar. Chung Myung smiled. It was obvious that every member of the Tang family felt anger at his words. but not a single one could openly express their anger. This was expected. Tanghak wasn't defeated by Chung Myung. He was defeated by one of his party members. If Yu Yi-seol was stronger than Chung Myung, she would have been the one to have the title of Divine Dragon. In other words, the probability of Tanghak ever being able to go against Chung Myung was nil. And still, he wanted to spar. This was no different from being openly humiliated. To look down on others and to overestimate yourself. This was something that one who led a family or a sect shouldn't do. What I'm asking is, Chung Myung looked around and said, who was the one who suggested this nonsensical spar? Naturally, everyone turned their gazes to one direction. No one could openly say it out loud, but as soon as they were asked that question, their heads reflexively turned to the person who had asked for the spar. All eyes went to Tang Wei. Tang Wei coughed in vain, with a face that indicated that he was feeling uncomfortable. Damn it. Things had become messed up. Tanghak couldn't be qualified as an opponent of Chung Myung. How could Tang Wei not know that? Wasn't that why he had tried to poison him? But when Tanghak had lost to Yu Yi-seol, everything had crumbled. It might have looked bad, but even if he had achieved a difficult victory, he could have become the successor of the family. The important thing was to win, not how he won. However, since he was defeated by Yu Yi-seol, all of Tang Wei's plans became meaningless. Furthermore, the countless eyes that were now pointed at him had the expression of asking him why he was so adamant about going through with this spar. Will I really have to explain this myself? Would everything be fine if it was revealed that he had poisoned Chung Myung even before the spar to win? As if he could say that. Now, he had to endure this abuse. Without thinking, without understanding the capabilities of his grandson, he was now forced to become an idiot who got verbally abused by Mount Hua's divine dragon. Tang Wei looked at Chung Myung, suppressing the anger that was about to explode any moment. All because of him. He wanted to jump up there and tear Chung Myung apart, but all he could do was stare. Because he couldn't bear to hear any news going around that an elder of the Tang family had attacked a younger disciple of another sect, he reined in his anger. Chung Myung smiled and looked at Tang Wei. Ah, so it was an elder. Chung Myung, who emphasized the word elder, tilted his head. But it is strange. I heard that the group of elders of the Tang family usually give advice to the Lord. But how can someone who doesn't even know the capabilities of his own grandson and his opponent be qualified to give advice to the lord of the family? How dare you! Unable to control his anger anymore, Tang Wei ended up losing his cool. Look, the lord who placed the bet ended up winning. So, who is giving advice to whom here again? You! Tang Wei's face contorted. Chung Myung was now hitting his sore spot. What has been done cannot be rectified, and unfortunately for him, he didn't get what he planned. But it was a fatal hit to Tang Wei to have his defeat revealed out in public like this in front of so many family members, because of this role as an elder who gave advice to the Lord. Naturally, an advisor couldn't be stronger or more powerful than the Lord, but he could have more insight than him. It was only natural for those who had grown up in the forefront of the family and lived with the title of elder to use their insight and experience for the betterment of the family. It's good that you're the elder. It sounds nice too, but I feel like you're holding on to the ankles of others without any qualifications. You better watch your mouth. I see that Mount Hua's disciple has a lot of arrogance. Unable to keep it in any longer, he spoke coldly. However, Chung Myung, who heard this, pointed to Tang Wei instead of fearing it. Look! Chung Myung smirked. You don't seem like you care though. You seem to not know who is being arrogant here. What is that? Chung Myung shrugged and looked around. Do you know why that happened? No one could answer. Those who knew it didn't speak, and those who didn't know couldn't answer. It's simple. As if to explain it to the ignorant masses, Chung Myung raised his hand and pointed to the stage. It is because you are weak. Tang Wei's eyes went wide. You are weak, so you don't know how strong the opponent is, and you are going to give advice to others? Chung Myung shook his head. I should be glad that you cannot do this anymore. Young man, you're still doing it. If you hadn't been caught up with such weird thoughts, you wouldn't have suffered such disgrace, and the head of the family would have been free to pursue what he wanted. This is the price he has to endure for listening to the old men trying to control everything from the back room. It was at that moment, Mount Hua's divine dragon, Tang Ganak spoke in a low voice. Be careful of what you speak. They are the elders of the Tang family. Our Lord has such a good heart. Chung Myung wantedly exclaimed loudly and then spoke with a cold expression. You still treat the baggage on your shoulders as adults and elders. You! Tang Wei jumped up from his seat. Just because I have been listening to you until now, you think you can keep crossing the line? How long do you think I can endure this? Look, you have no senses. What? All this time, I kept telling you that you shouldn't speak out without knowing your opponent. How can you not understand a single thing? And what? Elder? Chung Myung looked straight at Tang Wei. Prove it. Do you have the qualifications for being an elder? How? What Tang Wei wanted to ask was, how can I prove it? Right. But, realizing that it was what Chung Myung wanted to know, he shut his mouth right away. Unfortunately for him, he had already said enough. Simple. You keep saying that you are being too patient with me. That is what the strong do to the weak. What? Which is why I said you don't have the eyes to see things for what they are. Chung Myung tapped his sword. Because I am stronger. Let's have you prove that insight. If the elder beats me, then the elder has good insight. And if I win, we can prove that those eyes of yours are of no use. Tang Wei smiled in dismay. In the end, Tang Wei, who stopped laughing, asked Chung Myung venomously, You want to spar with me? Wow, I've been explaining for this long and you still don't understand? It shouldn't be that difficult. Tang Wei patted his neck. One word, just one word, and things had turned upside down. But he couldn't stand it anymore. Just because you got some title, you seem to have lost your reasoning completely. Do you want to spar with an elder of the Tang family? Excuse me? Chung Myung took a deep breath. I know that your hearing isn't that great because you're old, but it is hard for me to keep saying the same thing over and over again too. What am I to do? Tang Wei bit his lip. But thinking about it, it wasn't outrageous at all. Anyway, the situation had already become unsalvageable. If he took down this cheeky bastard in front of all these people, he could close the situation even if his reputation could take a nosedive. Lord! Tang Wei looked up at the Lord of the Tang family and said, What do we do? If I kill that child, you will understand, right? Tang Ganak spoke with a blank face. Mount Hua's divine dragon is a friend of the Tang family. So, I cannot stop what my friend is doing. Huh? Tang Wei became embarrassed as he heard what the Lord said. I must really look like a joke to you. Tang Wei immediately moved to the stage, and before the fluttering robe could even stop, he looked at Chung Myung with a serious face. You went too far. You should have stayed within your limits. You should be careful. Chung Myung laughed. I am not talking recklessly. After this is done, you will still have to carry on living as a family. So how are you going to carry your face around after the spar? Tang Wei didn't respond. He just wanted to use the most poisonous needles and daggers he had on him and kill the brat in front of him. And just in case, let me ask, are you going to use poison? Tang Wei bit his lip. He was someone who used poison as his main weapon, and if he couldn't use it, he would lose a third of his abilities. But that would still be enough to kill him. Just as he was about to say he wouldn't use it, Chung Myung said, If you want to use poison, there will be one condition. Condition? It is more of a bet than a condition. Chung Myung looked at Tanganak, who smiled. He didn't know what it was, but it meant he trusted Chung Myung, and the words which followed were shocking even for Tanganak. If your side wins, things will be as you wanted. Mount Hua will leave the Tang family and won't ever look back at this place. Right, that idiot successor too. The Lord will make that one into a successor. Huh? Tanganak's surprised voice was heard, but he couldn't stop them now. Tang Wei, who couldn't believe it, asked Chung Myung, "Are you insane?" "Don't worry, I'm completely sane. You still haven't heard the other part of the bet. And that is, if I win." Chung Myung's smiling face turned cold. "You don't need to tell me, since I'll do whatever you want, you fucking bastard." Chung Myung took a deep breath and said, "Disband your party of elders and step down. The insights of elders like you are useless to the Lord of the Tang family." The cold voice of Chung Myung penetrated the ears of everyone in the room. Return of the Mount Hua Sect, Chapter 208. Grandfather's rod is quite painful to accept. No matter how we look at it, it is crazy. Baekchun was the one who said it. It is definitely crazy, but knowing what Chung Myung is usually like, Yoonjung felt it was reasonable, considering what Chung Myung's behavior was like. Isn't it because he ate too much spicy food back there? Jogul felt a bit suspicious, and it was enough to make the people there ponder the situation. Mad, Yu Yi-seol said firmly. Baekchun looked at Chung Myung. A spar with the elder of the Tang family. If we think about it, right, it isn't that crazy considering his personality. Because that guy went against the elders of Wudang back in the sword tomb, and compared to the Wudang elders, thinking about it, how is this guy still alive? But if they looked at things that way, shouldn't Chung Myung have died 100 times already? He must have a plan, right? Probably. Baekchun glanced at Tanganak, who was next to him. Lord, yes. Did something happen between you and Chung Myung before? Tanganak smiled, and Baekchun nodded at the smile. Ah, as expected, you knew. It is my first time hearing about this. Seeing Baekchun, who looked dazed at his response, Tanganak added, "The thing I talked about with Mount Hua's divine dragon in advance was about something different. We haven't talked about anything even remotely related to him going against the elder of his own. We haven't talked about anything even remotely related to him going against the elder on his own." Baekchun smiled happily. Right, this is our Chung Myung. Damn it. Since you sparred with Chung Myung yourself, you should roughly understand what the situation is. If Chung Myung and the elder fight, who do you think will win? You should roughly understand what the situation is. If Chung Myung and the elder fight, who do you think will win? It will be a one-sided slaughter. By Chung Myung? No, the elder. Everyone was wide-eyed as they heard that. I thought that the Lord has a good impression of Chung. Don't get me wrong. Mount Hua's divine dragon is really strong. It is impossible to find someone that strong in his age group. Yes, but the elder is strong too. Tanganak shook his head. The real power of the Tang family comes from poison and needles combined together. As you know, I didn't use poison against Mount Hua's divine dragon during our spar. If it were just the assassin techniques being used, it would be in Chung Myung's favor, because Mount Hua's divine dragon is strangely strong while moving his body and sword. However, the elder excels at defense too, and if he has no countermeasures against poison, the disciple's body will eventually succumb to it. No, don't say such horrifying words with that face. Who is out there fighting now? But even the elder of Wudang couldn't. Tang Wei is the great elder of the Tang family. I, too, heard that Mount Hua's divine dragon survived the fight with Wudang elder Ho Sanja. However, Ho Sanja is an elder of the Wudang sect, and he cannot compare to our elders. The retired elders of Wudang have to come out for this man to lose. Baekchun's face went stiff. Yunjong, after listening to all that, spoke right away. So, shouldn't we stop this? Baekchun bit his lip. This is a battle a warrior started for his own honor. What will happen to Chung Myung's honor if we drag him out? You think that brat cares a thing about honor? True. Jogul grabbed Baekchun, who was shaken. Hey, Sahyung, is he even someone who would stop because someone asked him to? That's true. Such a damned bastard. In the end, they had to look at Chung Myung with a worried face and just trust him. Tang Ganak, who looked at the disciples of Mount Hua, clenched his fist. Friend. Let's just call it my whim. Mount Hua's divine dragon had said that. Because of his whims, he wanted to be friends with the Tang family. But Tang Ganak had a bitter smile. Will you risk your life because of a whim? He clenched his hands even stronger. Friend. A friend. It felt like he was incoherently thinking about this word. It is probably a friend who does things for you without a price. Tang Ganak gripped the daggers inside his sleeve. I will not let you die, even if it means war with the elders. Tang Ganak clenched his teeth. Dismantle the party of elders. Yes, and just disappear into our residences. It would be nice if you leave the Tang family. Tang Wei laughed. I thought you were smart, but you sound so stupid. I already made a bet with the Lord that if Tang Hak loses, I will not interfere with the Lord's decision. And do you think I will be able to even say anything if I lose to someone like you? A kid? Yes. What? But that's how you seem. Chung Myung shrugged his shoulders and said, a person who knows shame wouldn't do such things. But, he tilted his head and continued, do you know? What are you talking about? Do you know what shame is? You brat! Chung Myung smiled like he was enjoying this. Anyone who had even a little shame wouldn't have let things get to this point. This is the same. Maybe you will try to use some excuse and interfere with the family matters again. Why? Because that is all you have left. Anger rose inside Tang Wei. At the same time, he snarled, and Chung Myung drew his sword. If you cannot let that go, though, he aimed it at Tang Wei. I will cut it off, those hands of yours. Tang Wei felt a bit intimidated. Just because one is old doesn't mean they're all adults. Chung Myung was someone who had no hostility to the elders of the sect. From the start, he too was an old man in a child's body, and he had experienced what it was like to be an adult. But these people weren't adults. True elders of sects took care of their subordinates. They had to realize that the moment they pressed down on their subordinates to establish their power, they lost their right to be called an adult. If Tangbo had seen this, he wouldn't have been as respectful as Chung Myung was. He would have shed tears of blood and killed them with his own hands. Real adults weren't like this. Hyunjong, the sect leader of Mount Hua, and Hyunsang, who silently supported them, and now, Elder Hyunyong, that man as well, and my Sahyong. Now I know how much they thought, cared, and loved Mount Hua. Chung Myung had just thought it was just unnecessary nagging, but what did he do for Mount Hua? Now I know what you mean. Tangbo had also regretted it. He had wasted his whole life regretting it, but now nothing could be done about that. All he left behind was a worthless reputation. Was Chung Myung different from him? Phew! He sighed. Still, it is fine, because I have a chance to make it right. This life will be different from the past. Come, jump in. I haven't accepted the condition yet. Then tell me. Chung Myung looked at both sides. Just say you won't accept it because of your fear of losing to me in front of so many people. Then we can just head down. There's no need to fight. Tang Wei took a step back. Come, do whatever you want to do. In return, a dark light shone in Tang Wei's eyes. You will die in the most painful manner. I'm scared. Chung Myung smiled. Don't worry, I will finish you without pain. There was no need for more words. The expression on Tang Wei's face disappeared in an instant. I was goaded by that brat's words. Everyone here had heard his words. He could feel the denial and the satisfaction they had against him from their eyes. Even if he killed Chung Myung, he wouldn't be able to regain his former honor. So this is what he aimed for. In any case, winning or losing didn't matter. Mount Hua's divine dragon had achieved the goal he had been aiming for, and no one would think it was weird for a child to die in the hands of an elder of the Tang family. Tang Wei had lost, but he had to do the bare minimum, because he couldn't stay cooped up in a room for the rest of his life. You need to die. He shoved his hand deep into his sleeve. He held onto the poison bottles that were deep inside. In some ways, it would be overkill to use such poisons in simple spars, but it was Mount Hua's divine dragon who had brought things this far. This was the price he had to pay. He retrieved the red poison bottle and slowly opened it and sprinkled that poison onto his hands. Now, anything he chose would have this poison on it. Seeing that, Chung Myung's expression darkened. Usually, the people of the Tang family used a glove made of deerskin when using poison, but now this man was using his bare hands. This meant that he was a master when it came to internal defense. Chung Myung smacked his lips. Ready? I don't need to be any more prepared to deal with you. That is an overstatement. You will find that those words won't protect you. Let's start. Chung Myung lowered his sword as if asking the Grand Elder to come at him, and eventually, qi began to flow from the body of Tang Wei. It felt soft at first, and then turned a bit harsh. After a few seconds, it felt like waves of qi were swirling around him. You seem to have thought that I held back because I had no power. If I put my mind to it, even the Lord isn't my opponent. Wow! His skin felt tingly. It wasn't because of the qi in the air, but the poison mixed in it. Look, the blue stone stage was slowly melting. Poison potent enough to melt stone. It was truly a terrifying skill to face. Get back! Move! To the back! Back! The members of the Tang family who saw this were terrified and retreated. Even the members of the Tang family, who knew and could handle poison the best, seemed scared. If they were clumsy around such a poison, they could get affected by it. The eyes of Tang Wei were dyed in black as he watched the people retreat. Die! Pah! From both hands, something black came out. Poison palm. A technique produced by mixing poison with internal qi was directed at Chung Myung. Shh! Chung Myung avoided it by simply twisting his body to the side. It was easy. There's no fun if I get hit so easily. However, as if he had expected it, Tang Wei took a step forward, and he immediately shook his sleeve. Swish, swish, swish. Poison needles fell towards Chung Myung from all directions. Fine, very fine needles, which were invisible to the naked eyes, were carrying poison on them as they moved for Chung Myung. They had a bloody force behind them that made them incomparable to the ones Tang Hak had used previously. However, it was Chung Myung, not Yu Yisol, who was dealing with this man now. Hitta! Chung Myung swung his sword from left to right, and the wind created by swinging the sword pushed the needles away. Without missing the gap, he swung the sword again in succession, and Chung Myung, who created a gap, flew towards Tang Wei. This isn't so tough. Chung Myung rushed ahead. However, there was a smile on Tang Wei's face. You brat! Swish! Red sand began to rise up with an explosive sound. and in an instant, the entire place seemed to fall apart. Tangunak, who watched it, screamed, "Ghost King's order! Elder, have you gone insane? You madman!" The disciples of Mount Hua looked at Tangunak, who suddenly started screaming. His face was contorted in shock. Ghost King's order. The Tang family had two kinds of poison. One were the herbs meant to weaken people, and the other were ones used to kill people. The Ghost King's order belonged to the latter. Using that in the spar was nothing different from killing him directly. No, actually, this was worse. One of the things that the Tang family kept in mind was to make sure never to use poisons that don't have a cure. But now, the elder had broken that law. "Stop it, damn it! Get that crazy old man out of here!" Tangunak yelled loudly, but no one approached the stage. No one would do it either. None of the people in the Tang family could cure this poison. In other words, even they wouldn't survive it if they were touched by the poison. Shocking! Tang Wei clicked his tongue, looking at the reaction of Tangunak. It was already too late for him to regain his reasoning. I should have done this much sooner. If only he had feared the man, this wouldn't have happened. The problem was that he was too obsessed with honor. You are too cheeky. He pulled out a handful of sand. The Tang family isn't a family of poison and daggers. It is a family of poison alone. You underestimated our family. The sand was sprinkled all over the stage. This wasn't the sand that Tanghak had used, however. This was the Chasing Soul in 7 steps, specially created by Tang Wei. No matter how great of a warrior you are, you will not be able to avoid all the poison present here. You sects despise the Tang family, but if we could have used our poison as we wanted, the world would have belonged to the Tang family. Seeing the shadow of Chung Myung in the rising dust, Tang Wei laughed. At first glance, he could see Chung Myung kneeling on the ground. He would die even if he just left him alone. But that won't do. He took out another poison bottle into his hand. As soon as he opened the lid, he directed it at the opponent right away. With the poison already wafting outside, a fresh blue smoke rose in the air. This is the last gift I will give you. It is called Gleeful Smoke. You will suffer like you are in hell until you die. It had that name because after being used, the poison would make the victim writhe in pain, but their actions would be as if they were jumping in joy. After being happy with what he did to Chung Myung, he looked at Tangunak. How is that, Lord? There was blood in the eyes of Tangunak. Return of the Mount Hua Sect, Chapter 209. Grandfather's rod is quite painful to accept. This crazy old man! How could you do this? Tangunak tucked his hands into his sleeves. His hands shook as he held onto the daggers within his sleeves. He was quickly losing control. But Tang Wei was looking at him and smiling. I'm merely dueling fairly. And you think that means you can use poison? That too, one without an antidote. Tangunak bit his lip. He was too late. Even if he jumped onto the stage now, he wouldn't be able to save Chung Myung. Moreover, he would also get affected by the poison as well. Tangunak, who was turning red with rage, pointed at Tang Wei and spoke in a terribly angry voice. Can you call yourself an elder of the Tang family after doing such a thing? Going against a child of a sect who pursued the truth of the sword, and to use poison that our family doesn't even have an antidote for. What is the difference between you and the sects in the forces of evil? He didn't call the man an elder anymore. Those who did such things didn't have the right to be addressed with such flashy titles. How could he respect a person who abandoned the rules of the family, which should be upheld whatever the cost? However, despite his words, Tang Wei laughed. The forces of evil, was it? Yes. Lord, wake up. This is why the Tang family couldn't control the world. He drew poison key into both of his hands. What is the Tang family's current situation? Even with our powerful poison and daggers, we are being criticized by the world constantly and is stuck in the corner of Sichuan, claiming to be kings of this bloody region. How long do we have to be bound by this outdated rule? Tang Wei's eyes twinkled in a crazy manner. Mei, Qingcheng, that isn't even the matter. If we decided to turn them into our enemies, it wouldn't even take a day for Mount Mei and Mount Qingcheng to turn into a bloodbath. But what about us? We are surrounded by this place, and we do nothing. Is this the future that the Tang family wants? So, you will start throwing poison at anyone. If you do that, it will only turn us into tyrants who want the world under them. But we will have the world. Am I wrong? Blood rushed up Tang Ganak's face. His anger began to rise so much that he was losing his control. Tang Ganak grunted through his teeth. What are you doing? Catch that sinner right now and put him in the cell. Sinner? Who is the sinner? Tang Wei pointed to Tang Ganak and began to yell. The sinner has to be the Lord who has weakened the Tang family so much. How ignorant do you have to be to go and join hands with Mount Hua of all? Tang Ganak's nails dug into his palm. He couldn't control his trembling fist. No matter how horrendous Tang Wei was right now, he was an elder of the family. As such, he couldn't attack him in front of everyone. And Tang Ganak clenched his hand and turned around. He didn't want to show it openly, but he knew that there were people sympathizing with the words of Tang Wei, and Tang Ganak began to regret it. It is all my fault. It was a mistake on his part to openly indulge in this conversation with Tang Wei, not realizing that the man had such ambitions hiding inside him. Above all, he should have never let Mount Hua's divine dragon fight him. He should have stopped it. He should have interfered right away. In fact, he shouldn't even have let it start in the first place. A moment's hesitation and his unreasonable belief in someone led to this terrible result. A child had died. When Tang Ganak was about to pull out a dagger from his sleeve. There! A cold wind was blowing from somewhere, and the poison was moving away from the stage. Those who saw that moved further back. Tang Wei used a martial art and pushed the poison up to the sky. If someone else got affected by this poison, then the tables would turn on him. And looking at the poison, which had been lifted, his face broke into a smile. He was going to send his condolences to Chung Myung, who was now just a flesh. What? Tang Wei doubted his eyes. What he saw wasn't a corpse that was rotting. It was just Chung Myung, alive and healthy. How? Although his clothes were stained by poison, the parts of his body that was exposed didn't seem to be suffering from any ailment, and the man was checking his body condition as he pushed his body up from the floor. Ugh! Chung Myung kept grunting. It was funny to see it, but Tang Wei couldn't laugh. Chung Myung puked a bit and then wiped his lips as he got up. It was difficult for Tang Wei to understand it. The poison. Did I eat too much? Chung Myung shook his head. The food of Sichuan is hurting my body. Tang Wei looked at Chung Myung as he couldn't trust his eyes. Tang Wei looked at Chung Myung as if he couldn't trust his eyes. Cooking, not because of the poison. How? How was he not affected? Tang Wei couldn't understand it. Hadn't everyone here seen him get hit? He was engulfed in the Ghost King's order and then was hit by the chasing soul in 7 steps. No man can handle so much poison. Of course, if it had been a master at his peak, they would be able to endure it to some extent, or maybe suppress it. But how could this child be at that level? Spit. Chung Myung spat a couple of times to clear his throat. I have a few things to correct you on. First, the reason the Tang family cannot make a name in the world isn't because it doesn't use its poison. It is because the poison doesn't work. What did you say? Chung Myung smiled. Seeing Tang Wei's reaction made him want to laugh. Reminds me of the past. But why don't you use the poisons of the Tang family? Oh, Hyung, have you ever heard of someone from the Tang family being the best in the world? Nope. See? In the past, weren't we a family that was on par with the Namgung family? It was said that the people that the Namgung family and the Peng family produced were higher than those who come from the Tang family. Because of the poison. Yes, of course, at the right level, it is the shortcut to many answers we seek. But just throwing a drop of water in the tea or rubbing something in the needle before poking someone, is there any need to fear that? But if we win so easily, will we ever be able to hone our skills? We aren't invincible after all. If we only use the poison of the Tang family, if we do that, our personal skills will never improve. Then, when we meet a Hyung like you in our lives, everything will fall apart for us. Those people back home won't understand it despite us constantly telling them. Poison is poisonous to normal people, but it won't work on those who are strong. Truly strong. Conquer the world with poison. If that was possible, there's no way that the Tang family would have fallen to the Heavenly Demon. Not just the Heavenly Demon. In the end, the Tang family fled because it simply didn't have enough people who could handle the people from the demonic sect. If warriors could be defeated using poison, then why did the demonic sect make them run in fear? A poison with no cure. Just because there was no cure, that didn't mean that the poison couldn't be removed. There would always be a way to deal with it. This was one of the two things that Chung Myung was sure of. How are you not poisoned? Even if you held your breath, it should have entered through the skin. All the poison should have worked. Tang Wei was losing it. If internal qi was channeled to block the pores in one's body, and if he surrounded his body with qi, then nothing could enter. As long as he didn't inhale the poison and didn't let it touch his skin, he wouldn't be poisoned. However, using this method when it came to needles was tough. As soon as one single needle touched the skin, the poison would flow deep into the body. The method that was used by most experts would be to purify the poison that had entered the body with internal qi. Masters who reached the peak would remove the qi in the body to dispel it. There was no need for any external antidote or cure. An antidote was just a drug that was made to neutralize the poison in the body for those who had ingested it. But what good was an antidote for people who could survive despite being poisoned? This was why the Tang family could never become such an influential place in the world, despite using such fatal poison. Tangbo knew this from the start. Tangbo was already treated as an outsider because of his decision, and he had gone through numerous situations and experiences to realize this. Thanks to that, he realized that a true warrior wouldn't lean on poison to make a name for himself. As such, he put everything he had into daggers. That was the birth of the 12th dagger, the inception of the soul-chasing dagger. Well, you won't understand it even if I explain. Let's just say that it is because I have a unique build. A self-curing body. That's too far-fetched. Chung Myung waved his hand. And the second one? Chung Myung frowned and said, the Tang family didn't form an alliance with Mount Hua. Mount Hua formed an alliance with the Tang family. This is a very important one, so remember it. The moment Tang Wei was about to speak in a puzzled way, Chung Myung spoke first. And finally, the third one. The Tang family lord saw through this kind of thing from the beginning and tried to work with Mount Hua. But you didn't see it till the very end. It must be difficult for the poor lord of the Tang family to deal with your lot. People like you are the ones who need to be spoon-fed right into your mouths. You. Chung Myung held the sword. Okay, let's continue. Feel free to use as much poison as you want. Wait. You shouldn't have been able to use internal ki. You're already... Tang Wei, who was speaking, went silent with a flinch. He almost said something he shouldn't have. Ah, that thing? Chung Myung smiled. Do you know what the most special trait of a stupid man is? He thinks he is the only smart one around. I expected something like this to happen before I even met you. What people like you do is clearly known to all. So you already took the cure for it. You keep saying stupid stuff. Your poisons don't work on me. Chung Myung smirked. Do it again if you don't believe me. I was going to, even if you didn't say it. With that, he used the Ghost King's order again. Once again, smoke rose around Chung Myung. Instead of a wide area, it was concentrated on Chung Myung alone. I told you it was useless. Chung Myung swung the sword and the smoke disappeared, and he walked to Tang Wei slowly. Tang Wei still couldn't understand it. He had clearly seen the poison enter the nose and eyes of Chung Myung. But then, he should have been affected. His body should have started melting down. But the man didn't seem affected by any means. I'm sorry, but it's not going to work. I told you, my body's unique. It sounded absurd, but it was true. Chung Myung's body possessed the purest ki in the world. Moreover, the ki of Tao was specialized in healing and purification, and no Taoist could compare to Chung Myung when it came to pure ki. It was a ki he was able to gather because he had the chance to start over. Poison was no problem for such a ki. It's a good thing that I ate the soul vitality pill. He cured the poison much better than he thought he would. He felt good as he thought about his impressive actions. Well, considering how much hard work he put into creating this pure ki, it had to be this effective. Chung Myung smiled and said, Now what will you do? Tang Wei's expression changed. His face, which was flustered, was now calm. You don't even know your own condition properly. Look at your hands before you talk. Chung Myung looked at it. Huh? What's this? His fingertips were dyed black, which was a sign of being affected by the poison. I knew you were great, but it seems like you cannot drive out the poison after all. Whoa! There's really all kinds of poisons, aren't there? Imagine how strong it had to be for this to happen. Tang Wei had a happy face. When you go to hell and meet the king of hell, tell him that you were sent there because you underestimated the poison of the Sichuan Tang family. You have a really kiddish personality. What? Chung Myung smiled. It seems like there's a limit on what goes through your head. But so what? The poison cannot be... It was then. Swish! There was a sound of something burning, and then flames rose from both the hands of Chung Myung. At the same time, a strong smoke also rose from his fingers. Chung Myung held out his hands. If I can't push it out, I'll burn it. Seeing the flame, Tang Wei mumbled as he stepped back. Samadhi true fire. How? Does that mean that this child is capable of something that only the best masters in the world can do? The moment Tang Wei was in shock and was unable to speak, Baekchun, who was watching it, sighed. He burns alcohol with fire, then burns the poison with fire. Just don't burn Mount Hua, please. Return of the Mount Hua Sect. Chapter 210. Grandfather's rod is quite painful to accept. The flame burned and created a smoke which spread high into the sky. Tang Wei had his mouth open as he saw this. How? Seeing Tang Wei like that, Chung Myung smiled. He was bound to be shocked. The Samadhi True Fire, which could be called the symbol of an ultimate master, was now being performed by a child. Who would imagine that this could happen? Actually, the Samadhi True Fire wasn't a technique with much history. What mattered when it came to this technique wasn't the history, but the skills and understanding it took to do it. And the key to that was to be able to freely use enough strength through training. In terms of operation of internal ki, Chung Myung had achieved a level which was unrivaled. Still, I'm the Plum Blossom Sword Saint. It was a bit strange to say that, considering that he was only a child now. But in any case, it wasn't that difficult for Chung Myung to be able to do this. If the body's internal ki couldn't purify the body of external influences, then burning it was enough. It was just like how he burned the alcohol's impact on his body. Chung Myung glanced at Tang Wei with a mischievous smile on his face. You are like a frog in a well. Tang Wei tried to break off the closed workings of the Tang family. Because of that goal, he couldn't walk past Sichuan, where they were considered to be kings. He hadn't seen the world outside. And looking at his reaction, it seemed like the Tang family hadn't changed despite 100 years passing. Then I need to change it, even if it means I have to destroy it. Chung Myung drew his sword and approached the man. Tang Wei hurriedly stepped back and used the poison that was in his sleeve once again. Die! Die, you monstrous bastard! The poison that he used touched the body of Chung Myung. Ah! Spit. Spit. Chung Myung spat out everything that entered his mouth. Ugh, so disgusting! Tang Wei looked at the scene with blank eyes. He looked at the man, shaking off the poisoned sand with his bare hands. He looked at the man, walking through the chasing soul in 7 steps like it was just normal sand. Now that he was watching it, all of it felt hopeless. Tang family's poison. Tang Wei stuttered. This cannot be. This can never happen. Ugh. All sorts of poisons were being thrown out from his sleeve. A black and red smoke, a blue pure liquid, and then a purple smoke. They were all thrown into the sky. Even the members of the Tang family who watched it became extremely scared and moved further back. However, Chung Myung pierced the cloud of poison with his hand and slashed the poison down like rain. I keep telling you that it's useless. It was in a very low voice. You bastard! Tang Wei burst into rage, losing his sanity. How? How did this happen? This shouldn't happen. I cannot lose. Not like this. He couldn't accept it. Everything he had created. If the poisons he had been training with for all his life turned out to be this useless, and even the technique that he had created that had become his last pride was crushed down, then why did he even exist? No, I won't let it end like this. Tang Wei, whose eyes were filled with rage, pulled out needles from the sleeve. He threw them at Chung Myung, and Chung Myung wielded his plum sword. Weak. Chung Myung's face contorted. The flying needles were fast, but that was all. It didn't have the force and the intimidation factor that the daggers of Tanganak had. You bastard! Dozens of coins could be seen on Tang Wei's hands. The Tang family's coins. That was the term for the coins that were used by the Tang family. In the past, this skill was used only by the Tang family heads or those who would succeed that position. Any person of the Tang family would be very proud if they were able to learn this, and they could confidently say that it was their training that had led them there. But now, the Tang family coins that were approaching Chung Myung looked as though they were brand new, like they hadn't been used much. Chung Myung's face changed. Tang Wei and Tang Bo. There was not a single thing in common between them. Tang Wei was a family elder, and he was someone with a supreme position, while Tang Bo was nothing more than someone who had abandoned his role in the family and walked out. But both of them held the position of the elder of the Tang family. But the biggest difference between them. You are stupid! Chung Myung's sword struck down the coins. Is this really the same technique of the Tang family that the world had once feared? Something that even Chung Myung once feared. What if it was Tang Bo on the other side now? The current Chung Myung would have been smashed down without even being able to stand for 3 seconds. But this man, He says he is the elder of the Tang family with these skills. Anger rose within Chung Myung. You probably shouldn't see this. Tang Bo knew very clearly that although the poison of the Tang family was good, it couldn't be used. He knew that the poison would eventually cause the downfall of the family. And in front of Chung Myung, he had saw the future that Tang Bo had feared. If your head doesn't understand, then I'll teach it to your body. Chung Myung moved forward despite the daggers coming at him. Seeing that, Tang Wei became puzzled. I will not lose! Tang Wei was using all the daggers and poison he could get his hands on. But regardless of whether it was poison or daggers, it all rose into the sky and poured down like rain. Full sky flower rain! Full sky flower rain! Full sky flower rain? Chung Myung heard sounds of surprise. No, you idiots! The full sky flower rain was one of the two greatest legends in the Tang family, along with their poison. But nothing that Tang Wei was doing was similar to that technique. The unfinished technique that was shown by Tang Bo in the past was beautiful enough to make even his victim fall into a dreamlike fantasy. Right, it was like a rain of petals that filled the world. It is like... Look well, Tang family. This is just an imitation, but I am the only one in the world who can imitate this. This is the profound knowledge and gift from Tang Bo to his family after 100 years. The daggers and poison which soared into the sky poured down like rain. In the rain of poison and daggers, Chung Myung simply raised his sword. As if the existence of poison was forgotten, he closed his eyes and pointed to the sky. Shake. The tip of Chung Myung's sword shook infinitely. Eventually, countless plum blossoms began to rise from the tip of the sword. 1, 2. Soon after, the plum blossoms, which had grown to several dozen, suddenly grew even more intensely to the hundreds and covered the place. Ugh! Tang Ganak, who saw it, opened his mouth without realizing it. This sword is different from what Chung Myung had shown in his spar with Tang Ganak. He couldn't say it for sure, but the Tang blood in him was screaming at him to not let Chung Myung's sword descend. Is this a fantasy? Plum blossoms. There were now plum blossoms in full bloom over the mountain, blowing their petals at once in the warm wind. The countless petals of the plum blossoms meet the daggers and poison which were pouring down on Chung Myung. And swish! The rain of weapons coming down met with a formidable force, lost their momentum and collided with the fragile petals of the plum blossoms and bounced off. It was the same with the poison needles too. Nothing could penetrate the plum blossoms. Ugh! Tang Wei looked at the scene blankly, with his hands hanging down. He looked at the poison and daggers that had been deflected, and the plum blossoms, which bloomed again and again indifferently, turned into petals in the sky. In an instant, the sky above was filled with plum blossoms. Petals were raining down from all over the sky. Some petals rose up lightly and moved gently, while the others fell down without a change in direction. The other fell straight onto the sparring spot. Hundreds and thousands of petals were covering the sky, each with its own path. A rain of petals. And it was also a dance of petals. How? Tang Wei groaned desperately, not understanding how this could happen. How, you bastard! The petals, which covered the surroundings, all flew towards Tang Wei. Ah! Tang Wei began to swing his ki-laden hands to protect himself. His speed was so great that even the hem of his long sleeves couldn't be seen. Ka-ka-ka-kang! The sleeve, which was hardened with ki, turned harder than steel and slapped away the delicate petals. But there were simply too many flying towards him. Slash! And a few petals caused wounds and small cuts on him. And some would pierce through his skin. His eyes were red and bloodshot. I am Tang Wei of the Tang family! The petals swirled around his body. Right now, However, Tang Wei of the Tang family couldn't be seen. Only the sound of his desperate and denying screams could be heard. Shh! And the petals, which were swirling around him, began to melt like the snow in the spring sun. Drip. Chung Myung pushed the sword into the sheath, and he raised his head to look at the person in front of him. Tang Wei. He stared blankly at Chung Myung. All the clothes were torn into shreds, and it was more horrible than a beggar's clothes. There were countless minor wounds on his body. Tang Wei struggled to open his mouth. This sword. A sky full of plum blossoms. A full sky of plum blossoms. This is the sword of Mount Hua. Chung Myung scratched the back of his head. Actually, this sword technique was a mixture of Mount Hua's sword and the final technique that Tang Bo had shown him in the past. In other words, it was a sword of Mount Hua, but it was also the secret weapon of the Tang family. Tang Wei couldn't have known all that though. Really? Tang Wei slowly moved his body. It felt like a dream. That sword. Thud. Tang Wei fell to the ground. At the same time, Chung Myung's eyes shone. Now that this is done, the head of the family can take care of the rest. No matter how hard Chung Myung had instigated and defeated Tang Wei in front of his own people, it would all depend on the will of the Lord. This is what Chung Myung is offering to you. Overthrow Tang Wei and destroy his martial arts, and just prove how useless the elders are in front of all these people. Chung Myung looked around at all the family members of the Tang family there, including the Lord. How is that? Tang Ganak had a complicated expression as he looked at him, but it was all for a moment. He took a deep breath and looked at Chung Myung. This time, the spar ends with the victory of Mount Hua's divine dragon, disciple Chung Myung. There were no loud cheers. There was just pin-drop silence. It was a moment that hinted at a change in the family system, and this brought awkwardness and anticipation along with it. Feeling these two emotions, Chung Myung looked up at the sky. Is this enough? He stared for a long time before he lowered his head with a bitter smile. He couldn't hear it, but he knew everything he was saying. The dead do not speak. The dead cannot return. Right. When he was supposed to die, he couldn't die and fell into the past, holding on to his regrets and constantly looking back at the past. Chung Myung slowly lowered his head and looked at his Sahyungs, and he whispered, Don't worry, you brat, because I'll take care of your Tang family from time to time. Of course, it won't be for free. It was at that moment when Chung Myung was about to walk down the stage. Thank you, Taoist Hyung. Unknowingly, Chung Myung turned back. Tang Bo was smiling brightly at him as if he was still alive. However, it disappeared like an illusion. Clench. Chung Myung clenched his fists and shut his eyes. Their relationship had now ended. A promise he couldn't keep in his last life was now kept at this moment. So, close your eyes comfortably and rest. Goodbye, my one and only friend.